Chapter 2292. Actually, she didn't understand Moe, but the more she didn't understand, the more she wanted to understand. 1,000-year story was already sad enough. She didn't want to wait for such a long time without a satisfactory result. That was why she tried so hard to see into his heart again and again. For hours later, Moe brought 2 jugs of wine and a few delicious dishes to Shimmer Palace. Luo Qingshun changed into an ice blue dress with a white pattern. She sat next to the golden dragon beast incense burner and waited for him. When Moe arrived, the snow had already stopped. Not only was the wine he brewed fragrant, but even the dishes he cooked were also fragrant. One could smell the roast chicken even from a long distance away. In an instant, her stomach began to growl. It seems like young master Mo wants to use good food to calm my anger. Luo Qingshun walked forward and took the basket. It really is roasted chicken. I've warmed up the wine, don't drink too much. Moye's voice was very pleasant to hear. There was a touch of warmth in it. Actually, she could feel that Moye's tone was completely different from Fengling when he spoke to her. Although he seemed to like Fengling a lot, after knowing this soul for so long, she felt that he was gentler when he interacted with her. Cuckoo. She took the jug of wine and felt the heat in her hand. She pursed her lips and said, "You still haven't told me about Huashang." The moment she asked this question, she felt like her head had been smashed by a metal pot. Why would she bring up Huashang for no reason? It was better to ask Moe about his plans. After all, Fengling was already grounded. Even if all her guesses were wrong and he really had deep feelings for Fengling he had to judge the situation now. In Fengling's situation, could it be that he still had to be a winemaker and run to the Moonlight Hall all day long? Of course, she didn't ask the question she wanted to know the most. Instead, she asked another question. In the next second, Moye's face darkened. He helped her break the drumstick and looked at her. "Do you care that much?" When he saw Murong Nan for the first time, he felt very uncomfortable. He was also a person of status, standing by her side so decisively, protecting her like a knight. He had always been conceited, but at this moment, 2 words flashed through his mind: a good match. He felt that when they stood together, they were inexplicably compatible. Unlike him, who had done so many shameful things. "I don't really care." Luo Qingshun took a sip of wine and took the drumstick. "I'm just gossiping." "Gossip? Well, it's not the 8 trigrams of the 5 elements 8 trigrams formation. I just want to watch the fun." Luo Qingshun thought for a long time before she came up with the word "watch the fun." "I actually don't know who Huashang is." Moe shook his head and said, "The Destiny Master's divinations are very limited, but also very broad. According to the 8 characters, Huashang should have died because of Murong Nan." "She's dead?" Luo Qingshun was stunned. Thinking of Murong Nan's reaction in the Imperial Garden and what Moe said, she understood a bit. Moe said with a nod. "She should be a 14, 15-year-old girl. She looks a bit like you. Is the Destiny Master this powerful?" "I can see it." Luo Qingshun excitedly grabbed his sleeve and said, "Then can you calculate things from 1,000 years ago?" Ding! Affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 40%. Chapter 2293. He looked at her for a long time before finally shaking his head and saying, "How could us mortals plan for things that happened 1,000 years ago? So you believe that people you met 1,000 years ago will meet again 1,000 years later?" Luo Qingshun took a sip of wine. The entire Glimmer Hall was filled with a faint wine fragrance. She knew that the other party did not have any memories, but there would always be a bit of hope in her heart. Hope that he would at least remember a bit. Even if it was just a vague memory, even if it was an extravagant wish, it still made people look forward to it. That shouldn't be the case. Moe also seemed to be very sad. He took a sip of wine and said, "Things that happened so long ago, why do you keep thinking about them? It's impossible to not have any regrets in this world, let alone 1,000 years ago." "Do you have any regrets?" "I do." "What regrets?" When he heard this, he took a sip of wine and gave a soft laugh, but did not reply. Luo Qingshun took a few large gulps of wine. She took a deep breath and looked at him as she said, "Now that Fengling air is like this, will you still go find her? You don't seem to like her?" Moyi did not immediately reply to her question, but instead asked another question. There will always be conflicts between people. Luo Qingxin's brows slightly knit as she said, "It's hard to explain." "That's right. It's hard to explain." And Moyi gave two bitter laughs as he said, "I will still go find her. That is the promise I made before." And Moyi seriously looked into her eyes when he said this, not leaving for a moment. It was as if he wanted to use those deep and beautiful eyes to convey his emotions, the most genuine emotions. She did not know why, but when she heard him say this, her eyes inexplicably turned red. She shook the wine jar and drank all the wine inside as she said, "I understand. Promise, promise, promise." She couldn't help thinking about the scene from 1,000 years ago. The ice-cold prison, the trial of despair. He had promised that he would protect her for a lifetime, but when their family returned on the first day, he didn't remember his promise. Moyi looked at her with an endless darkness in his deep eyes. After a while, he said, "Can you wait for me for 10 days? 10 days? Luo Qingxian said with a self-deprecating laugh. "All right, let's disappear from each other's world for 10 days. I'll wait for you. If you don't come, I won't wait." "All right." He gently raised his hand. You can't." Luo Qingxian said. "Luo Qingxian." Moyi looked at her aggrieved expression and sighed softly. He couldn't help but say all the words in his heart, but after a few seconds, he used all his strength to suppress them in his heart. Pain, very pain. He wanted to give her a hug and a kiss between her eyebrows, but he couldn't do it. Ding! Affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 50%. Actually, when he gave her affection, she would still be happy. But she still wanted to hear it. She wanted to hear him say that he never liked Fengling air. She wanted to hear him say that the person he cared about was called Luo Qingxian. The night was very quiet, and he didn't let her drink any more after she drank a jar of wine. She wasn't stubborn and sent him to the entrance of the dim light palace. She looked up at him and said, "I'll wait for you for 10 days. Don't forget like you did when you deleted your lines." "Last time?" He slightly knit his brows and doubtfully said, "When was the last time? If I said 1,000 years ago, would you believe me?" She pursed her lips, and her eyes were as clear as water. Chapter 2294. 10 days. In these 10 days, Luo Qingxian had not seen Moyi even once, and Moyi had not come to find her. He still went to the Moonlight Palace every day and every night, drinking a jar of wine every day, never stopping. Fengling air always looked at him with gratitude and said, "You're so good to me. After a while, when the emperor's anger passes, I'll go ask elder sister for mercy. And then," she paused for a moment before continuing, "marry me." As soon as her voice fell, she shyly lowered her head, her enchanting eyes filled with expectation. "Do you still remember the Mid-Autumn Festival Lantern Banquet?" Moyi's expression did not change at all. His inky black eyes stared at her, as if he wanted to swallow her whole. Fengling air froze for a moment, as if she remembered that Moyi had asked her the same question not too long ago. At that time, Luo Qingxian was also there, so she did not pay too much attention to Moyi's question. Now that he asked it again, she felt that it was especially familiar. Could it be? She slightly nodded, and her eyes sparkled with expectation as she looked at him. "We've met before." Hearing Moyi mention the Mid-Autumn Festival Lantern Banquet, could be where they first met. There were too many men who loved her in this world, but it was a pity that she was cold by nature. Adding on the fact that the person she loved had already died on the battlefield, she did not care about those men at all, until Moyi's appearance reignited the throbbing in her heart. This man who was 70% similar to Gu Zhao was so good to her. He knew that she liked to drink, so he became a winemaker for her. Even if she was grounded and all the people who said they loved her left her, he still came every day without a care. He was better to her than Gu Zhao, much better. Back then, Gu Zhao only had Feng Xer in his eyes and heart, but now Moyi was only good to her. Even if that princess was interested in him, he would always give a cold response. Finally, You finally won once. Won that face? Huh. He chuckled and shook his head. No, I haven't. I just heard from others that there was a woman who was particularly good at the Dark Night Stars dance. That's me. That's me. Feng Ling said yes twice in a row. She smiled proudly and said, no one in Chang'an City can dance the Dark Night Stars better than me. Really? Yes. How many people have prostrated themselves before me because of this dance? She smiled faintly, but Mo Yi did not respond. Because there was once a person who fell madly in love with her because of her dancing. But in the end, he died on the path of loving her. As for Feng Ling, she didn't even know that person's name. She couldn't even remember what that person looked like. Seeing that Mo Yi didn't say anything, she continued, after we get married, I'll dance for you. Okay? Okay. He smiled faintly in response. Today was already the 10th day. He knew very well that the dissolute woman called Feng Ling would never be able to dance again in this life. In fact, Feng Ling didn't notice that her face was getting paler and paler. She was as thin as a match. Whether it was her hands or feet, many places had a faint purple color. It wasn't that she didn't notice the changes in herself. She thought that it was because her life these past few days had made her sad, so her complexion was so bad. In fact, the poison had already entered her bone marrow, but she didn't know it. Yes. Chapter 2295. There was a reason why Mo Yi wanted her to die, but there was a reason why she had to die. His memories went back to last year's Mid-Autumn Festival. His senior brother Yuran was also a divinator, but he was just an ignorant and incompetent divinator. This profession required a lot of talent, and they needed to constantly survey the star's orbit to calculate divination. Unfortunately, Yuran had neither talent nor hard work. He only had one good point, kindness. Mo Yi had been his senior brother from the same sect for many years, and they were as close as brothers. He would never scold anyone, and if anyone needed his help, he would do his best to help. In his eyes, Yuran was just a big brother next door. He would try to enlighten him, treat him to wine, and listen to him talk about his worries. Unfortunately, such a good person didn't have a good ending. During last year's Mid-Autumn Festival banquet, he watched Feng Ling perform the Dark Night Stars dance, and fell in love with this prostitute that the common people called. Mo Yi didn't like women like Feng Ling, but he didn't look down on her either. Everyone had the right to choose how they wanted to live, and Feng Ling had the right to decide how she wanted to live. However, this kind of happiness shouldn't be built on someone else's life, especially his friend, his closest senior brother. He clearly remembered the day he came back during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Yuran was very excited, and he kept talking about how he had seen such a stunning scene. At that time, he was happy for him. This kind and honest person had finally found someone he liked for the first time. However, the next day, when he went to find Feng Ling he didn't come back. On the third day, the Yaman only asked him to go and identify the corpse. It was a corpse whose throat had been pierced by a sword. He heard that Feng Ling had invited many officials and nobles to perform together, and whoever she liked the most would go on a boat trip with her. Yuran was an honest person. Other than being kind and helpful, he didn't have any other good points. He didn't know how he caught Feng Ling eye. He could only wait until the most powerful person was chosen, then defeat him. In the end, Feng Ling chose a person who knew how to swallow a sword with his mouth. That 1-meter-long sword was swallowed into his throat, but he was still able to pull it out in one piece, which shocked everyone present. So what if it's 1 meter long? I can swallow a 2-meter-long sword. Coincidentally, the acrobatic class had an even longer sword. Although it wasn't 2 meters long, it was much longer than the previous sword. Leisurely held his breath and swallowed it whole. However, the damage caused by the long sword was irreversible. No matter how careful Yuran was, the sword still managed to cut through many of his internal organs. When he took out the sword, it was already covered in blood. The acrobatic class student said with a dull face, "You've got guts." As soon as he finished speaking, he left angrily. Yuran thought that Feng Ling would agree to go on a boat with him after he had paid so much. Unexpectedly, she only looked at him with disdain and said leisurely, "How unlucky." After saying that, she turned around and left without looking back. The men who had been surrounding him also followed her. Suddenly, Uran was the only one left in the lively place. He couldn't hold it in anymore and spat out a big mouthful of blood. In fact, he had already calculated his fate. However, if he could be alone with Feng Ling Air in this lifetime, even if he died, it would be worth it. Chapter 2296. That night, he did not return to his sect. Instead, he spent the night in a memorial home 3 miles away from Chang'an City. That was a place filled with resentment. He leaned against the coffin on his last breath. His heart was filled with regret, hatred, and love. It turned out that not every love in this world could last until the end. It turned out that all the sincerity he had given was worthless in the eyes of the other party. But he could never start over again. He was about to die. He knew dying in a place filled with resentment might be the final destination of a divinator. The next day, his body was found and sent to the yamen. The yamen runner told him that the body was found in the memorial home and sent to the yamen. He asked Mo Yi if he needed an autopsy. Mo Yi took a look. The hatred in his eyes slowly dissipated and turned into coldness. He shook his head lightly and said, "No need." As a divinator, he could tell the cause of death with just one look. There's only one person in this world who could make him die like this. That person was Feng Ling Air. There were countless wounds on the body. They were all sword wounds. Bit by bit, they seeped into his life. What a cruel torture. In this dark memorial home, no one responded. Only death awaited him. 7 days later, Mo Yi, dressed in white, went to the memorial home alone. He swore that he would avenge Yuran. He would use the cruelest method to kill Feng Ling Air. Tian Shan Begonia. It was a slow-acting poison unique to his sect. Anyone who took it for a month would definitely die. The poison was colorless and tasteless. After a month, the person's life would slowly fade away. Bit by bit, each day would be more painful and torturous than the last. On the last day, all the internal organs would turn into blood. Not a single bone or skin would be left. He swore that he would use this method to make Feng Ling Air accompany him in death. However, he did not expect that he would meet Luo Qingshun. That was an accident in his life. The most beautiful accident. After 10 days, Mo Yi did not look for Feng Ling Air again. She was getting thinner by the day. She hoped that he would come, hoped that he would come. Unfortunately, Mo Yi never came. 10 days later, Luo Qingshun thought that Mo Yi would come, but he only sent a letter. The content of the letter was very short, but Luo Qingshun looked at his beautiful and powerful handwriting and almost cried. Although it's difficult, it's easier to write it down than to talk about it. I didn't fulfill my promise because I'm not good enough for you. You will soon know what a cruel man I am. And he is a good person. I've already understood Hua Shang's matter. With a good person by my side, there's no need for an unnecessary man. I will guard you for a long, long time until you don't need me anymore. Mo Yi, in fact, Luo Qingshun already knew about Hua Shang's matter. Murong then came to find her the next day and told her everything. He said that he was a bad person and that he had let Hua Shang down. Because Hua Shang looked similar to her, she received a lot of care from her. However, some people just couldn't be satisfied. They would always want more and more things. Hua Shang wanted to become his crown princess, but he rejected her. After that, she did many wrong things and secretly killed many people. In the end, he couldn't stand it and punished her. Although the story was very short, the kind-hearted Murong Nin still felt that he had caused her death. If he hadn't treated Hua Shang differently from others in the beginning, she wouldn't have wanted more and wouldn't have walked down the path of no return. Chapter 2297. Luo Qingshun didn't know where Mo Yi had gone. Perhaps he had returned to his sect, or perhaps he was traveling the world. After Mo Yi left, Feng Ling Air's sorrowful singing could be heard from the Moonlight Palace every day and every night. Sometimes there would even be a faint singing that could be heard for an entire night. No one dared to go near that place. It was said that there were a few times when the eunuchs and palace maids passed by and accidentally saw some dirty things. The night was dark and the wind was strong. The woman was dressed in white. Her long hair was messy, her bones were like firewood, and her eyes were about to fall out of their sockets. She sorrowfully called out a person's name again and again, again and again. Luo Qingshun never went to the Moonlight Palace again. She only heard later that Fengling heir had disappeared. No matter where she went, she couldn't find her figure. The entire Moonlight Palace was covered in scattered bloodstains. Some people said that she was killed by an assassin, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't find her body. Some people said that she could have created a scene and ran away because she wasn't willing to be left alone. Some people even said that Mo Yi took her away. Luo Qingshun personally went to the Moonlight Palace. As soon as she arrived, she knew that Fengling heir was already dead. It was just that there was no corpse left. Qingshun girl, let's go back. Murong Nan, who was standing beside her, trembled and said, I keep feeling that this place is especially eerie. Ever since Murong Nan came to the palace, he had been with her almost every day. He ate with her, drank with her, and missed someone with her. He knew that she was waiting for Mo Yi. He also knew that Mo Yi had an unreachable position in her heart. So when the palace maids said that the strange things that happened in the Moonlight Palace might be related to Mo Yi, he immediately came with her. Of course it's eerie. Luo Qingshun took a light breath and said, How can it not be eerie when someone is dead? Hiss! Murong Nan sucked in a breath of cold air with a shocked expression. He swallowed his saliva and said, Isn't it still unconfirmed? Although the bloodstains are scattered, there is obviously a pattern. Luo Qingshun pointed at the floor and said, It leads to the door. Murong Nan looked in the direction of Luo Qingshun's finger and instantly felt a chill on his back. You? What do you mean? The Supreme Court said that the corpse hasn't been found yet, so we can't make a conclusion. Every bloodstain you've stepped on is her corpse, Qinlai said. Luo Qingshun bent down and gently brushed the congealed blood with her right hand. The blood was densely packed with pebbles. When these things were mixed with the blood, it was hard to tell what they were, but Luo Qingshun could roughly guess that they should be somewhere like the skull. Murong Nan's face was slightly pale. This was the thing he was most afraid of. At this time, his legs didn't have much strength, and he almost couldn't stand. But Luo Qingshun was still by his side. He couldn't faint. He still had to protect her. Little did he know that in the next second, a cold wind suddenly blew through the window, and the air was filled with the thick smell of blood. There seemed to be a figure standing outside the window. She looked over from the corner of her eyes and saw it clearly. This. What's going on? Don't talk. Luo Qingshun frowned, and her gaze fell on the bloodstains on the ground. The congealed blood seemed to gradually dilute at this moment. If she wasn't dreaming, if she wasn't mistaken, then some things really did exist in this world. What's going on? Cold sweat dripped down Murong Nan's forehead. Chapter 2298. The moment they walked out of the Moonlight Palace, the cold wind stopped. Luo Qingshun looked at her right hand. The blood on it was still a bit sticky. Murong Nan grabbed her and quickly ran, only stopping when they arrived at the Imperial Garden. Scared me to death. He patted his chest and said, Although I don't believe that kind of thing exists in this world, that palace just now was too unlucky. If you don't come with me in the future, don't come. Luo Qingshun's relaxed expression sunk. She gently knit her brows and said, Perhaps it still exists. Since this was the world of the heavens' fate masters, it wasn't strange for something to exist. Moreover, when she was in the Moonlight Palace, she had already personally confirmed this point. Outside the window, Fengling heir's body was covered in blood, and her soul was pieced together with rotten flesh. Her eyes that had fallen out stared at her, wanting to make her feel fear. But she had an indifferent smile, not showing any fear. Little girl, what kind of existence did you just say? Murong Nan clearly hadn't recovered yet as he looked at her in disbelief. Luo Qingshun's expression was serious as she said, The soul of a malicious spirit. This world really is ghosts. Where the heavens' fate masters exist, it isn't strange for there to be ghosts. Luo Qingshun nodded and said, But malicious spirits are a bit difficult to deal with. The heavens' fate masters could predict the future and connect the two worlds. Things like ghosts could exist in any world, whether they could be seen or not. You're saying that phone Feng Ling heir has become a malicious spirit? When Murong Nan said this, he didn't even have any confidence. It seems like he really was afraid of things from the underworld. Actually, Luo Qingshun wasn't afraid. After all, this kind of thing wasn't strange. It was just that she didn't know how strong she was. Reality proved that she had underestimated the malicious spirit Feng Ling heir. This was because in the following month, she had already encountered 7 accidents in a row, and each accident had turned danger into safety. Girl, it seems that Feng Ling heir is looking for you. Murong then looked at her worriedly and said, although we've managed to avert danger every time, it's obvious that she wants to harm you. Why don't we find a Taoist priest from Maoshan to exorcise the ghost? Luo Qingshan narrowed her eyes, a touch of doubt flashing through her eyes. After a long time, she smiled bitterly and said, so you never left, huh? Who did you say didn't leave? It's not that I'm lucky. From the first time the flower pot fell, to the fire this time, it's not that I'm lucky. She pursed her lips as a faint liguang flashed across her clear eyes. Because of Mo Yi. That letter seemed to be a farewell, but if one read it carefully, they would find some clues. He was a heaven's fate master, so he naturally knew that after Feng Ling heir died, she would turn into a malicious spirit. That was why he said that he wanted to leave her. Actually, he was just using a different method to secretly protect her. That was why he was able to avert danger every time. Didn't Mo Yi leave a long time ago? Murong Nan's eyes were cold. Looking at her slightly teary eyes, he felt a bit uncomfortable. He thought that if Mo Yi left, he would have hope, but even if he stayed by her side every day, she only treated him as a good friend. But he still persisted, believing that sincerity could move metal and stone. Chapter 2299. So that's how it is. He smiled bitterly, his tone somewhat helpless. But when he thought that there was someone silently protecting her, he felt somewhat relieved. In fact, he was such a person. He liked her, liked to silently accompany her, and liked to see her happy. This might be the most important thing to her, but if there was someone who could protect her better than him, it might be a happy thing for him. But why won't he appear? Luo Qingshun pursed her lips, her eyes trembling slightly as she muttered. Could it be that 50% of the favorability is not enough to make him appear? What? Favorability? Nothing. Luo Qingshun shook her head and said, I have a way to make him appear. That night, Luo Qingshun made sufficient preparations to force Mo Yi to appear. Midnight, at the memorial hall. For the underworld, the Yin energy was the heaviest at night. And the memorial hall was a place where ghosts and undead gathered all year round. Feng Ling heir would definitely stay here. She brought 3 candles, one on the east, and one on the east, and the other in her hand. There was a rumor among the people that when people light candles, ghosts blow out the lamp. As long as the candle was extinguished, it meant that there was a ghost nearby. Who was Mo Yi? He had stayed by her side for so long, protecting her safety, but he did not let her know. This proved that only in the most dangerous place there was a way to make him appear. The memorial hall. The surroundings were dark and gloomy. It was cold and humid all year round, and the air was filled with a foul smell. She could even hear the sound of water dripping around, sometimes far, sometimes near, sometimes far. The candle in her hand could only light up a weak candlelight. With every step she took, the candlelight seemed to dim a little. Until now, at the center of the memorial hall, a gust of cold wind blew, and the 2 candles on the ground quickly extinguished. Only the lamp in her hand was barely able to support the weak light. The candlelight made pa-pa-pa-pa sounds, and there was also a clear howling sound. She looked in the direction of the sound, and saw a black lump of flesh and blood next to the coffin not far away. Luo Qingshun narrowed her eyes. The exquisite ring on her right ring finger was ready to be summoned at any time. She wanted Mo Yi to show himself, but that didn't mean that she would play around with her own life. The male lead hadn't been conquered yet, so how could she die? She narrowed her eyes and looked at the extremely ugly Feng Ling heir and said, now that I look at it, you look better when you're a human. The worst thing is you're too ugly. You shut up. The terrifying figure not far away trembled and used an ethereal and desolate voice to roar. "You are not qualified to talk to me like this." She looked even scarier when she was angry. Two of her pearls fell to the ground, and dark red blood flowed out of her mouth drop by drop. "Oh, I'm a human, and you're just a homeless ghost." Luo Qingxun shrugged and said provocatively, "You couldn't even beat me when you were a human, let alone now when you're just a ghost." Dying in such a painful way. She saw every inch of her body melt into a pool of blood with her own eyes. She wanted to call for help, but she couldn't speak. She couldn't stand up and could only crawl step by step. She crawled very slowly, but the blood flowed very fast. She was in a lot of pain. This kind of death was the world's greatest torture. Therefore, at the moment of death, her soul was filled with resentment and turned into a malicious ghost. Chapter 2300. So what if I'm the one who killed her? Luo Qingxian gave a cold laugh and said, "You couldn't even kill me when you were a human, not to mention you're just an ugly ghost now." Shio. In an instant, the entire memorial hall began to shake. Luo Qingxian's goal was to anger Feng Ling Air, and she had succeeded. Green smoke filled the surroundings as a withered hand came out of the coffin. Luo Qingxian narrowed her eyes. She wasn't afraid at all. She was just a bit disgusted. Ghosts killing people, it's natural. As soon as Feng Ling Air's voice fell, Luo Qingxian felt a strong pressure. She moved very quickly, reaching out a dark hand to take her life. Luo Qingxian stood there, not moving at all. She was waiting, using danger to wait for that youth to appear, until Feng Ling Air charged in front of her. She felt her body become light as she fell into a warm embrace. Ding! Affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 60%. How long? He hadn't hugged her. Actually, he missed her hug more than anyone else. He missed her scent. He missed her clear as water eyes. But as a Destiny Master, there were times when he couldn't do as he pleased. It was because he knew too much that he wasn't qualified to approach her. But he never thought that she would come to this dangerous place alone in the middle of the night. Didn't she already guess that Feng Ling Air had turned into a ghost? Why did she still come? Luo Qingxian didn't turn around, but that familiar embrace made her know that the person protecting her was Mo Yi. It seems like my risk was worth it. Luo Qingxian proudly pursed her lips. She turned around and said, "You still appeared. What are you doing?" He knit his brows and felt a chill run down his back. He said in a reproachful voice, "Don't you know it's very dangerous?" He never thought that she would put herself in this kind of dangerous situation because of him. Mo Yi. When Feng Ling Air heard his voice, her sharp voice became soft. Although it still sounded very uncomfortable, he could feel that she was using all her emotions to call out these two words. "It's me." But Mo Yi's voice was very, very cold. It was even colder than this memorial hall filled with ghosts. "Why did you save her? Look at me. Look what I've become." Feng Ling Air raised her hand and touched her face. Then she said through gritted teeth, "It's all her. It's me who deserved to die. Mo Yi, take revenge for me. Take revenge for me." Feng Ling was very agitated, and the temperature in the entire manor had dropped below zero. Luo Qingxian knit her brows and prepared to fight at any time. "What reason does she have to kill you?" Mo Yi narrowed his cold eyes and said, "There's no deep hatred between you two." "How can there be no?" Feng Ling Air roared. "She's jealous of me. She's jealous that you treat me well, jealous that you make wine for me, jealous that you love me, but not her. Mo Yi, don't be fooled by her. She never needs to be jealous that I make wine for you." Mo Yi looked coldly at Feng Ling Air and said, "Because it's not ordinary wine." "What?" Feng Ling Air was stunned. Her eyes fell and revealed a trace of fear. Chapter 2301. "No." Feng Ling Air angrily roared as she desperately shook her head. Her face was filled with disbelief as she roared, "Impossible! Impossible! Impossible! How is this possible?" That man who didn't hesitate to become a winemaker from a heaven's fate master for her. When everyone else had abandoned her and left her, He was the only one who had resolutely stayed by her side. She didn't believe it. She didn't believe a single word that Mo said. During the mid-autumn banquet, you once said that you would go on a cruise with a man that caught your eye. Mo's eyes became even colder. He looked at Feng Ling with a hateful expression as he said, "That person who swallowed a sword in order to go on a cruise with you. You've forgotten him quite quickly." Feng Ling stared blankly for a moment. It seemed like it took a long time for her to come back to her senses. She truly didn't have any impression of the people that Mo spoke of. She only remembered that one person had swallowed a sword and spat out a bit of blood, making her feel nauseous. Normally speaking, she didn't want to remember this kind of disgusting scene too clearly. So even if she tried her best to remember, she could only remember some fragments. Looking at your expression, you shouldn't be able to remember. Mo carefully protected Luo Qingchun behind him. His cold eyes looked at her as he said, "My senior brother died here because of you." In this desolate place, life was slowly fading away. But even so, he didn't become a malicious spirit. He even forgave Feng Ling. "So you approached me." Feng Ling looked at Mo with a face of horror as she said, "Just to kill me? That's right. Making you suffer until you die was my promise to Yuran." A line of blood tears slowly flowed down. Feng Ling's body couldn't help but tremble. So it turned out that every time he approached her, it was to kill her. So it turned out that she was the one who was kept in the dark, the one who didn't even know she had died. "So you and Luo Qingchun." Feng Ling glared at him. "You like her?" Luo Qingchun's eyebrows moved slightly. She raised her right hand and tugged at the corner of his clothes. Mo did not hesitate to shake his hand and said, "Yes." "Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 70%. Finally, he was finally able to stand by her side and hold her hand. The things that he wanted to do but couldn't do. And now it had all come true. If Feng Ling did not feel despair when she died, then at this moment, other than despair, she only felt hatred. He hated Mo. She hated Luo Qingchun. He hated everything in the world. Since she was going to suffer a painful death, then she couldn't let them have an easy time. Vengeful ghost's grudge. In the next second, Feng Ling slowly opened her mouth and muttered in a low voice. Mo knit his brows, and there was a trace of worry in his deep eyes. It wasn't that he had never seen a ghost before, but he had never seen such a vengeful ghost. "If there's anything, come at me." His voice was very cold as he spoke word for word. The bad things that happened to Luo Qingchun before had already made him worried. If there was, then what Feng Ling wanted to do would not be limited to just this. "Come at you? Ha 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 ha." She wildly laughed as the dark red blood on her body dripped down drop by drop. After a few seconds, she narrowed her eyes and her black lips slightly curled as she said, "If I can't have it, then no one else can. Happiness is such a luxury. What right do you have to have it?" In an instant, the entire memorial hall lit up and Luo Qingchun felt a strong aura attack her. Before she could return to her senses, Mo had already held her firmly in his arms. Chapter 23:02. When she woke up again, it was already the next day. She woke up in her warm palace, and Mo was standing in front of the window with his hands behind his back. Right now, the palace maids were using lotus leaves to wipe her body and making lotus leaf tea for her to drink. "Princess, don't go to that kind of place in the future. When you came back yesterday, your face was so pale that the servants were scared to death." That's right, that's right. There have been many strange things happening recently, and even young Master Moron went to find the Mountain Taoist. "No need." And Mo turned around and looked at her slightly pale face. "I will protect you." "What happened?" Luo Qingchun knit her brows and looked at him as she asked, "What is the malicious spirit's grudge that Feng Ling mentioned?" "I am a heaven's fate master." Mo raised his right hand and rubbed her head as he said, "This is not something you should be worried about." His eyes were still very deep, and they seemed to be filled with heavy emotions. This kind of emotion made Luo Qingchun feel especially afraid. "Do you still not have the qualifications to know what you are worried about?" Luo Qingxian looked at him with a serious expression and said, I hate your eyes like this. It was like he was putting everything in his heart and taking care of everything by himself, not telling anyone else. Do you really want to know? Emoyi looked at her, and there was a faint light in his deep eyes. He liked her. Perhaps it was the first time they met, or perhaps it was just a casual moment. In short, he liked her. There was no reason for it. I want to know. She looked up, and there was a faint mist in her eyes. It was just that she wanted to face everything with him, whether it was danger or happiness. When he heard this, he pursed his lips, and a faint smile appeared on his handsome face. After knowing him for so long, she had rarely seen him smile. Every time they met, his eyes were as deep as ink, and they were filled with endless worry. Actually, his smile was even warmer. I was just thinking about how I should tell the Emperor to marry the person he's been thinking about all his life. He paused for a moment before continuing. Even though the person she has been thinking about might not be me. She was stunned for a moment, and it took her a long time to come back to her senses and understand what he had said. Take her as his wife? So, is this what's troubling you? Of course. He walked forward and gently patted her little head. After all, Your Highness the Princess status is very honorable. My opponent is Murong country's crown prince. Imperial father dotes on me. He will agree to whatever I want. Luo Qingxian pursed her lips, lowered her head, and said shyly, So, when does Gongzi Mo ye plan to confess? Now. I like you. He looked at her, a faint Li Guang flashing in his deep eyes, with a focused and serious affection. When Luo Qingxian heard this, she was slightly stunned. She probably didn't expect Mo Yi to confess so seriously and so directly. She was about to open her mouth to say something, but Mo Yi had already reached out and gently pulled her into his embrace. His embrace was very light, but when he hugged her, it felt like he used up all his strength. Mo Yi's love was like this, silent and deep. Then from now on, don't go back on your promises, okay? Luo Qingxian used her cheek to gently rub against his somewhat cold clothes and said, I hate people who don't keep their promises the most. At the beginning, he clearly said that he would come back to find her in 10 days, but he still didn't appear. If she hadn't gone to the memorial hall and risked her life, she didn't know if she would ever see him again in this life. If I go back on my words in Chapter 2303. All right, he nodded and made a promise to her once again. The next day, Mo Yi went to find the Emperor. He had been in the Supreme Harmony Hall for a long time, and when he came out, there was an imperial decree in his hand. Luo Qingxian was holding a light blue umbrella, waiting for Mo Yi to come back in the snow. In 10 days, you will be my bride. He reached out his hand in the snow and placed the imperial decree in her hand as he said, Are you prepared to marry me? Really? She looked at him with a look of joy and couldn't help breaking out in laughter as she said, Does royal father really agree to us? That's right, my Princess Highness. He saw her happy face and his eyes were full of love. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 80%. So this was the feeling of liking someone. Seeing her happy laughter, there was a strange feeling of joy in his heart. He wanted to always be by her side, no matter what method he used or what price he had to pay. But she hoped that she could be safe. Then let's enjoy our final moments as single people. Luo Qingxian held the imperial decree in her hand and said, Let's go out of the palace to play, all right? Since that time we went to the memorial hall, it's been a long time since we went there. The maids always said that it was dangerous outside the palace, and adding in the fact that she had been targeted by the evil spirit, there were many strange things that happened. If it wasn't for Mo Yi secretly protecting her, her life would have been in danger. However, after the incident at the memorial hall, those strange things seemed to have completely disappeared. Going out of the palace, Mo Yi thought about it and said, We'll go after we get married, all right? This is bad. Luo Qingxian pursed her lips and said, You have to be a good wife after getting married. You can't play around. You can play around. Mo Yi looked at her with a smile and said, You can keep playing around. Oomph. Luo Qingxian snorted. When the time comes, you'll definitely say that I'm delicate. No. He was stunned for a moment, and his gaze slightly trembled. His voice that was as cold as water entered her ears. No matter if it is me or anyone else, no one will think that you are delicate. Other people? Luo Qinshan pouted and said, other people have the right to care if I'm delicate or not. I'm not their wife. In their eyes, I'll always be a princess. Probably because the atmosphere was too good, Luo Qinshan didn't feel the hidden meaning in Mo Ye's words. Of course, in the end, he did not allow her to leave the palace. Luo Qinshan did not insist on going out, because Mo Yi had given her some compensation for not being able to leave the palace. Every day, he would drink a jar of peach blossom wine, 100-flower honey, and osmanthus cake. Sure, it seems like my future husband is very clear about what I like to eat. Sitting under the peach blossom tree, Luo Qinshan picked up the peach blossom wine and drank 2 mouthfuls before saying, you don't know how much I used to envy Feng Ling Er. You don't need to envy that kind of woman. He probably didn't think that Luo Qinshan would mention the 3 words Feng Ling Er. His originally relaxed face instantly sank. For Mo Yi, Feng Ling Er was like a malignant tumor. She wanted to take the life of the most important person to him again and again. She looked at his sunken face and immediately said, let's not talk about her. But I'm very curious. How did you subdue her that day at the memorial hall? She hadn't asked Mo Yi about what happened at the memorial hall that night. Today, she took advantage of the alcohol to casually ask, but she didn't think that Mo Yi's expression would be somewhat flustered. Chapter 23:04. Wow, that's amazing. She reached out her hands, wanting to grab his arm and worship him. She didn't expect him to pull his hand back. Luo Qinshan looked at him with a puzzled expression. She didn't know that he just smiled and said, a girl who is about to get married should be reserved. You can't casually touch your future husband's hand before you get married. What kind of stupid rule is this? Luo Qinshan pouted proudly. However, she seemed to know about this custom. In fact, it would be best if they didn't even see each other. However, her family's Mo Yi couldn't help but want to see her. Every time he came, he would bring delicious food and look at her with a doting gaze. He talked about everything with her, from their childhood to their life after they grew up. Can a divinator really predict everything? Luo Qinshan tilted her head and looked at Mo Yi, asking, I heard that some powerful divinators can even predict their own date of return. Suddenly, the surrounding atmosphere fell into silence. After a long time, Mo Yi nodded and said, I can predict it, but I can also change fate. PFFF, Luo Qinshan blinked and said, isn't it said that since ancient times, fate can't be changed? There's a huge price to pay for going against the heavens and changing one's fate. Some are the lives of others, and some are even the souls. When Mo Yi said this, his deep gaze was slightly blurred. Luo Qinshan couldn't see it clearly. She only felt that Mo Yi's eyes were very deep at this moment. Time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, 10 days had passed. On the 7th day of the 1st month, she was going to marry Mo Yi. It was snowing heavily in Chang and city, but the imperial palace was full of celebration. Luo Qinshan was also very surprised that her imperial father agreed to her marriage so quickly. After all, her imperial father still hoped that she would marry Murong Nan. Not only because the 2 countries had a good relationship, but also because Murong Nan was someone who was worth entrusting her life to. Before Luo Qinshan got married, Murong Nan appeared. Murong Nan had disappeared ever since they returned from the memorial hall. Whether it was the emperor announcing the date of her and Mo Yi's wedding, or the 10 days that she and Mo Yi were inseparable, Murong Nan had never appeared. Luo Qinshan would occasionally think that he was a young man who knew when to advance and when to retreat. He was not like other people who would destroy or entangle with what they obtained. Inside the Glimmer Palace, Murong Nan carefully gave her an exquisite box. Inside the box was a large red brocade pouch. Although the person you're marrying isn't me, no matter what the outcome is, you have to be happy. He looked at her seriously, his eyes twinkling. This is the ending I wanted the most. Luo Qinshan took the box and said, Thank you for your gift. She wore a phoenix coronet and a red gown. Her makeup was exquisite, and she was devastatingly beautiful. The little palace maids helped her cover the bridal veil, and she got into the bridal sedan nervously. Murongnin looked at the back of the sedan, and his pair of carefree eyes gradually darkened. In fact, whether it was him or Mo Yi, what they wanted the most was not to get Luo Qingshun, but for her to be happy. If she could be happy, it didn't matter if he didn't get her. He could even stand far away and look at her from time to time. Unfortunately, the heavens didn't follow people's wishes. Lovers often couldn't get married. Luo Qingshun was going to Mo Ye's mansion in Chang'an City. The emperor had personally given it to them for their wedding. Chapter 23:05. The sound of gongs and drums suddenly stopped, and it was completely silent. It seemed like only the sound of the wind could be heard, accompanied by a touch of strangeness. Wedding matron. Luo Qingshun's brows slightly knit, and she softly called out to the window of the sedan chair. After a few seconds, there was no response. She narrowed her eyes and felt that something was wrong. She quickly took off the bridal veil, covering her head, and lifted the curtain of the sedan chair. What entered her eyes was darkness. Other than a few wedding matrons and servant girls who had already fallen on the ground, there was no one else. As the mansion prepared for their wedding, there were no festive decorations. Other than the two large red lanterns at the door, it was like an abandoned mansion. What was going on? Mo Yi, where was he? Aha! Just as Luo Qingshun was lost in thought, a sharp voice came from all around her. This voice seemed familiar, but it was missing a touch of emptiness. Luo Qingshun stared at the woman standing not far away. She was wearing a large red wedding dress, a phoenix coronet, and a red flower on her mouth. Her face was unfamiliar, but her eyes were very familiar. Feng Ling Air. Luo Qingshun narrowed her eyes, and there was a touch of depth in her eyes. Did she come back to life in someone else's body? We are worthy of being enemies. Feng Ling Air raised her eyebrows, and the corner of her mouth raised into a confident smile. You don't have the qualifications to be his bride. You don't have the qualifications to be happy, just based on you? Luo Qingshun sneered. Her right hand gently waved, and the exquisite ring gave off a faint golden light. Feng Ling Air was stunned. She clearly didn't think that Luo Qingshun's body would give off a golden light. But the next second, she came back to her senses and said with a cold smile, "But even if you have any algebra, it's useless. Where did you get the courage to be so confident in yourself?" Luo Qingshun's cold eyes narrowed. A pair of clear eyes looked at her with contempt and said, "Isn't that just a ghost that came back from the dead? What else can she do?" Hearing this, Feng Ling Air looked at the upside-down crescent moon in the sky and said, "Very soon. You will know very soon." As soon as she finished speaking, she began to count down. Luo Qingshun looked at the corner of her mouth raised, and her brows furrowed even tighter. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, let's exchange. Feng Ling Air opened her arms and welcomed the light of the moon, welcoming her new life. The vengeful ghost's grudge, as the name suggested, was a type of curse. He had used the pain of falling into eternal hell in exchange for the reincarnation of his soul in this life. On the 10th day of the curse, one could face the moon and exchange their souls. Ha ha ha! Feng Ling Air laughed very loudly. She was laughing crazily with all her strength. Luo Qingshun stood with her hands behind her back. If Feng Ling Air rushed towards her, she would take out the Phoenix dance sword from her portable space and fight to the death with her. Little did she know that another cold voice interrupted Feng Ling Air's laughter. With a whoosh, Mo Yi appeared in front of her at an extremely fast speed and steadily shielded her behind him. Do you really think that your curse at the memorial hall that day was successful? Mo Yi slightly nodded. There was a dim light in his cold eyes. Of course I succeeded. Feng Ling Air admired her new body and said, "If I didn't succeed, how could I come back from the dead?" Chapter 23:06. Feng Ling Air's body trembled as her eyes fell on Luo Qingshun not far away. She was still standing there steadily. Her body was her body, and her soul was her soul. Impossible! How could this be? She had paid the price of falling into the underworld in exchange for changing her fate in this life. Why couldn't she succeed? Impossible. I succeeded. I must have succeeded. Feng Air almost roared out. How could the grudge she had set up with such a heavy price fail? You're right. You did succeed. Moye's lips hooked into a smile. But it's only half a success. She didn't know why, but at this moment, when Moye was standing by her side and his cool voice entered her ears, she didn't feel at ease at all. Instead, she felt an inexplicable panic. Moye was also dressed in a wedding suit and habitually stood a little to her right. She pursed her lips and wanted to reach out to grab his arm, but he nervously took it back. You, Qin-chun. Moye interrupted her words. He looked at her from the corner of his eyes and said, I'm a person who doesn't keep my promise. I don't deserve to be with you. When he said the last word, his voice was slightly choked up. Luo Qin-chun could clearly feel that he was trying to control his emotions, forcing himself to speak to her in the calmest tone possible. At this moment, Feng Air suddenly looked up and looked at him in horror. Could it be that you, seeing her red face turn pale? Moye coldly smiled and said, You guessed right, we're the same kind of people. Same kind of people. Same kind of people. When these three words came out of Moye's mouth, Luo Qin-chun felt like her world was about to collapse. She wasn't a fool. If Moye's previous actions had made her feel a little strange, tonight, she had probably completely guessed the answer to her doubts from the conversation between him and Feng Air. They were the same kind of people. Feng Air was a ghost that had reincarnated in someone else's body. Then 10 days ago at the Coffin Manor, it wasn't as if nothing had happened. The grudge of the malicious ghost was not that easy to escape, and all of this was because of Moye. As a destiny master, he could communicate with yin and yang, so he could naturally calculate her return. At the Coffin Manor, Moye had died. It was just that no one knew. Feng thought that her vengeful ghost curse had succeeded perfectly, so she found a good-looking woman and reincarnated in her body. She waited for midnight 10 days later. That would be the day when her plan would be completed. But what she didn't expect was that in order for Luo Qin-chun to live on and not be cursed, Moye didn't hesitate to use another extreme method to block Feng Air's grudge. Moye. Oh, Moye. Is she worth you sacrificing so much for? Feng Air smiled foolishly, a line of blood tears falling down. Perhaps even Moye didn't know that she really loved him. It was because she loved him so much that she hated Luo Qin-chun so much. She hated that she was able to obtain Moye's love. She originally planned to secretly exchange souls with Luo Qin-chun, then stay by his side and live on as Luo Qin-chun. But she didn't expect that the ending would make her so heartbroken. Chapter 2307. After that, his cold eyes slowly looked up as he said, Whether she's worth it or not is up to me. It has nothing to do with you. As soon as his voice fell, the cold wind began to blow and the snow on the ground was blown up, blowing up the hem of her wedding dress. Feng Air already knew that she didn't have much time left in the world of the living. So she gave a few laughs before saying in a sarcastic voice, That's right. It has nothing to do with me. But when I saw her pained expression, I suddenly felt that I wasn't that unwilling. Luo Qin-chun's cold eyes narrowed as they stared right at Feng Air. She wanted to refute her, but those words were stuck in her throat, and she couldn't say a single word. Because she was right. She was in pain, a pain that was close to despair. Perhaps she didn't completely understand the curse, the reincarnation of a soul, and the matters of the Destiny Master. But she knew that the Moye standing in front of her to protect her was no longer a person. Rather, he was a ghost that had reincarnated in her body. No, not now, but rather 10 days ago. If she can live happily, I have no regrets in this life. Moye replied to Feng Air as he said in an incomparably cold voice, At least I had her, and she had me. But you can't be with her anymore. She can only live the rest of her life alone. Feng Air gave a wild laugh. Her sharp voice filled the empty street, making people's hairs stand on end. No, she will meet someone better. Moi narrowed his eyes and said in a firm voice, "Perhaps that person already exists." "That's right. That person exists." Luo Qingshan took a deep breath and quickly grabbed his hand as she said, "It's you." Ding. Affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 90%. His hand was very cold. It was almost 0 degrees cold, without a trace of warmth. She suddenly thought of the day he carried her back. She felt the coldness on his back. And under the bare peach blossom tree, he suddenly withdrew his hand. He could not let her touch him, because as long as she touched him, she would know that he was not a human, but a ghost that had reincarnated. He wanted to spend the last 10 days with her. That would be the most precious memory that would be engraved in his heart. "Qingchun, Moi, you're a big liar." Luo Qingchun looked at him and couldn't help but say in a trembling voice, "Actually, I've never understood you. Even though I have so many favorable impression points, I still don't understand you." Just like how Luo Qingchun didn't understand Moi 1,000 years ago. Even after 1,000 years, she still didn't understand him. Or perhaps she didn't want to understand. "Don't cry." He raised his hand and touched her tear-stained face with heartache. "You can only cry for me to see. That person doesn't have the right to." As soon as his voice fell, he took out a black talisman from his chest and attacked in Feng Ling Air's direction. Feng Ling Air was clearly not willing to leave like this. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws to resist. In the blink of an eye, the Phoenix Dance sword fell from the sky and cut Feng Ling Air's body in half. That ugly soul that was pieced together by countless pieces of rotten flesh was instantly separated from the body. In the middle of the soul, there was a deep sword mark, and the corpse that she had reincarnated in had already died. Its eyeballs had already fallen out. Chapter 23:08. They saw Luo Qingshan in her red clothes standing in the snow. She held the Phoenix Dance sword in her hand as her long hair fluttered in the wind. Moi and Feng Ling Air were both stunned. They never thought that Luo Qingshan would make this kind of move. "Feng Ling Air, I didn't want to mix the previous life with this life." Her eyes were filled with absolute coldness as she raised the Phoenix Dance sword. Looking at her, she said, "But I'm afraid that even if we don't mix the two, I still won't let you go." He. She gave 2 cold snorts and said, "With just you? I have already used my eternal life in exchange for the curse. I have nothing left to lose, so what can you do?" Naturally, she could feel how strong the Phoenix Dance sword was. Although she didn't know why Luo Qingshan would have this kind of thing, everything was already set in stone. She couldn't kill her, but she also couldn't be with Moi forever. Like this, she was the winner. At least in the underworld, she could be with Moi forever. Time could heal all wounds, and it could also make you forget the person in your heart. Thinking of this, her mood became even better. Even her lips couldn't help curling up. Eternal life in the underworld. Luo Qingshan slightly raised her brows, and the haze in her eyes almost froze people. She looked at Feng Ling Air and said, "I'm afraid you don't have the qualification to go to the underworld." As soon as her voice fell, she raised the Phoenix Dance sword. With a flash of golden light, she slashed down at her ugly soul. In that instant, Feng Ling Air's body began to split apart. Pieces of rotten flesh scattered in the air, releasing a stench. You actually, does it feel good to have your soul scattered?" Luo Qingshan gave a cold laugh as she looked at her and said, "No one can steal Moi. I will protect him until he..." After that, the person standing behind her suddenly grabbed her hand and pulled her into his embrace, using all his strength to hug her. Ding! Affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 100%. With a bang, Feng Ling completely dissipated into the air, leaving behind only a few ugly pieces of flesh. There was nothing else. The surroundings seemed to quiet down. She didn't know what would happen if she didn't intervene. However, she knew that she had to say goodbye to Moi. "I'm leaving." His deep and pleasant voice sounded by her ear, carrying a slight tremor and reluctance. He was using all of his strength. "You lied to me again." Luo Qingshun raised her hand and knocked on his back twice. Why do you always lie to me? Where's your promise? What happened to the agreement? Suddenly, even she felt that she was pitiful. Every time she waited with anticipation, every time she thought that she could go on forever with the person she loved. However, there were always twists and turns in the plot, which inadvertently caused her to be covered in bruises. But she couldn't blame him, and she didn't have the right to hate him, because everything he did was for her own good. Perhaps in Mo Ye's heart, his so-called love was that as long as the other side was alive, it would be the greatest gift. But she was different, whether it was heaven or hell. She only liked to stand by his side. Misfortune, fortune, wealth, they would share it together. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Mo Ye repeated again and again. He took a deep breath and said, Forget about me. Live well, live happily. Don't be afraid. I've already found a way to resolve your fate. I've already helped you block all of your disasters. Don't say it. Luo Qingshun covered her ears. She suddenly thought of that year. When he was at death's door, he had also said the same thing. Chapter 23:09. Don't say any more. I don't want to hear it. She closed her eyes and gently grabbed the corner of his clothes, feeling his last bit of strength. If there's a next life, please don't remember me. These were the last words Mo Yi said to her. His low and desolate voice rang in her ears. It seemed that every time Mo Yi left her behind, even if there were irreversible factors, even if there was nothing he could do about it, but he still left her behind, didn't he? She kept her eyes closed until the frivolous soul scattered in the air, fusing with the cold snow and falling into her palm. What fell in her arms was a body without a soul. Perhaps it was too artistic to describe it that way, but it was just a corpse. This world seemed to have ended just like that. It ended without any warning. The skies slowly brightened and the snow gradually melted. Luo Yu and Murong Nin personally came to pick her up. They didn't look surprised at all, as if they already knew the ending. That's right. They all knew the ending. She was the only one who was kept in the dark. No wonder Luo Yu agreed to her marriage with Mo Yi so quickly without any hesitation. It was no wonder that Murong Nin had not come to look for her during those 10 days. Because those were the last moments she had with Mo. Luo Yu gave Mo Yi a grand funeral and buried him in the Luo Imperial Mausoleum as the prince consort. From beginning to end, Luo Qingshun never appeared. She personally brewed several jars of peach blossom wine and sat under the withered tree, drinking cup after cup. She wanted to get drunk, but she was extremely sober. Murong then came every day. At first, he would say a few words, but after a while he stopped. He would sit next to her and drink with her. Do you think I still need to wait? Luo Qingshun glanced sideways, as if she was talking to Murong Nan, but also as if she was talking to herself. The air was filled with the faint fragrance of peach blossom wine. Murong Nan was a little tipsy from drinking. He looked at her eyes and wanted to reach out to hug her, but he retracted his hand. Her eyes, which were as clear as water, were filled with tears. It was a gaze that he could not look straight at. After a long time, he sighed deeply and said, I think you already know the answer in your heart. She laughed foolishly and drank a mouthful of wine. She nodded and said, I'll continue to wait. I knew you were someone with this kind of temper. Murong then seemed to relax. He shrugged and smiled. Stop drinking. I'll take you to see someone. Who? Mo Ye's master, the Abyss. Luo Chen didn't know how Murong Nan found the Abyss. She just knew that although the Abyss Taoist had white hair and a white beard, he looked even younger than Mo Yi. Your Highness, no need. Luo Qingshun said with a nod. Taoist priest, please sit. Your Highness is truly a beauty capable of causing the downfall of a city. It's no wonder that my disciple. He paused and sighed. He's lived his entire life for someone else. At first, it was Yuran. Later, it was you. As a master, his two most important disciples left one after another. No one could understand the pain in his heart. I'm sorry. Luo Qingshun slowly lowered her head and took a deep breath. I'm the one who hurt him. No, it's not. The Abyss shook his head and said, this is what he thought was worth it, so it's not wrong. No one is paying the other back. Taoist. Chapter 23:10. Luo Qingshun did not fully understand what the Abyss Taoist meant. She only knew that he gave her a light blue crystal bead. He asked her to stand in front of Mo Ye's coffin and silently recite his name on the 7th day of his death. What does the Taoist want to do? Luo Qingshun looked at the crystal bead in her hand and frowned slightly. Murong Nan, who was sitting to the side, shook his head and said, "I'm not too sure either. Last time, when she sent Mo Yi away, she asked for your name." "My name?" "Yes." Mo Yi nodded and said, 3 days after the Abyss Taoist left, he contacted me and said that he wanted to see you." Luo Qingshun frowned slightly. A faint guang flashed in her eyes. The crystal bead in her hand was cold to the touch, and her heart was filled with anticipation. This was the kind of anticipation that one would fight to live after death. However, in this world, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. She was still afraid. After all, the dead could not be brought back to life. "Little girl, don't worry." Murong Nan raised his hand and gently patted her shoulder. "In the past, I didn't even believe in ghosts. Although I was afraid of these things, I didn't think that such things existed in this world." He paused for a moment before continuing, "But now I believe." "So what?" Luo Qingshun pursed her lips and said, "But he can't come back." These past few days, she had been thinking about how Mo Yi had felt when he was with her during those 10 days. They drank wine and admired the moon. They chatted about everything. She always felt that she had let him down. It was like this 1,000 years ago, and it was still like this 1,000 years later. Not only did she not change fate, she even caused history to repeat itself over and over again. "But he's a heaven's fate master." Murong Nan looked at her and comforted her. "Besides, the Abyss Taoist specially came to find you. He must have a way." Souls return to the underworld. Humans cannot enter the underworld. Luo Qingshun bit her lip. Her eyes were a little blurred as she said calmly, "But if possible, I'm willing to enter the underworld, as long as you give me the chance." The 7th day of Mo Ye's death, Luo Qingshun wore a moon-white long dress with butterflies and 100 flowers. Her hair was combed with a tassel hairpin, and a butterfly hairpin was slanted on the top of her head. She stood in front of the mausoleum, her eyes unconsciously turning red. On the day he was buried, she did not come. "I heard that there was a huge snowfall here." The wind and snow blew fiercely, almost overturning the coffin lid. After hearing the news, she hugged a jar of peach blossom wine and hid in a corner, crying loudly. He did not know how to change the outcome, and he was even more unwilling to return to the primal chaos space. She called out to the system, but the system only told her to wait. Other than waiting, there was nothing else to do. But it took all of her strength just to say the word wait. But at least there was still hope, right? If there was no hope, why would the system make her wait? At the appointed time, Taoist priest Abyss did not show up. There were rows of palace maids and eunuchs wearing white mourning clothes standing around. They were all here to send off the prospective prince consort on the 7th day. Only Luo Qingshun knew that she was not here to send him off. She was waiting for a miracle. "Where's Taoist priest Abyss?" Luo Qingshun frowned. She looked at Murong Nan, who was not far away, and said, "Why hasn't he come yet?" "I don't know." Murong Nan frowned. The time was about to pass. He looked at the entrance of the mausoleum. A little boy wearing gray clothes quickly walked over. Chapter 23:11. Return to chaos. The Abyss Taoist was dead. Luo Qingshun looked at the child in shock. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the crystal bead. How could it be? How could he suddenly die? Murong Nan. She looked at Murong Nan in a panic. His serious expression made her even more scared. Was Fengling Air not dead? Was she still alive? Murong Nan tried his best to calm himself down. He nodded in her direction and said, "Continue." Luo Qingshun closed her eyes. She held the crystal bead in her hands. Her heart was in a mess. It seemed that everything that happened today was completely different from what she had imagined. Things that were not planned often made people feel helpless. She took a deep breath and murmured, "I met you in Chang'an. I miss you in Chong, and that was not only a heavy condolence word by word, but also what she wanted to say to him in her heart. She wanted to finish her words and leave no regrets. After all, today might be her last day in this world. Since even a cultivator like the Abyss Taoist could not bring him back from the underworld, then no one in this world could do it. I hope to see you again in the next life. If you don't love me, I will return the love you have in this life. As soon as the voice fell, there was a burst of crying. The whole cemetery was filled with a sad atmosphere. She pursed her lips. The pearls of the broken string in her tears fell down one by one. They fell on the back of her hand, on the cool crystal bead. 1,000 years of love, the reincarnation of all things, returning to the beginning, reading the chapter. Suddenly, a heroic and majestic voice came from the surroundings. A strong wind suddenly blew. Luo Qingshun could tell that the voice came from the dead Abyss Taoist, but she could only hear his voice and not see him. Abyss Taoist. Luo Qingshun's eyes trembled. She held the crystal bead tightly in her hand and took a deep breath. Is it you? Your Highness, if everything returns to the original place, are you willing? The voice was still very clear in her ears, but she could not find the Abyss Taoist. She could only nod desperately and say, as long as he can come back, I can do anything. She could give up everything. Identity, status, fame, power. She could give up on all these intangible things, as long as Mo.Yi could come back. At least let him see him one more time and tell him everything that he wanted to say. The crystal is an item that connects time and space. Your Highness, this old man can only help you up to this point. As soon as the voice fell, the wind immediately stopped. Luo Qingshun felt the crystal bead in his hand emit a dazzling light, and the white light illuminated his eyes. Little girl. Murong then cried out in alarm when he saw her faintly discernible figure. His eyes were filled with anxiety. For some reason, he had a very strange feeling. It felt like she was leaving, like she was never coming back. In her pocket was the box he had given her on the day of her marriage. Inside the box was a brocade pouch. On the day Mo.Yi left, she lost the brocade pouch in a daze. Later on, he found it again. Murong man, Luo Qingshun still wanted to say something, but she only felt that her surroundings were surrounded by white light. Suddenly, a huge circle of light appeared in front of her. Layers of light surrounded her, and countless scenes appeared around her, quickly flashing before her eyes. Catch! Murong then shouted and threw the brocade pouch in her direction. It just happened to fall into her hands. Chapter 23:12. Host, welcome back to 1,000 years ago. This was the first thing the system said to her after the world had spun around her. What? 1,000 years ago? She almost cried out in surprise, her heart pounding. Standing in the bustling moonshine city, she suddenly felt like she was in a dream. It turned out that the system made her wait for this reason. It turned out that the sacrifice of the abyss was for this reason. She came back to 1,000 years ago, the life she regretted the most. In fact, the original owner regretted a lot of things. Because she couldn't describe them one by one, she later named herself Regretful Mother and used this name to travel all over the world. System, I want to know, when was this 1,000 years ago? The Luo family has been convicted, but not yet executed. After a long time, she took a deep breath, and her clear eyes suddenly became sharp. Which Mo.Yi is this Mo.Yi? Although the Mo.Yi from 1,000 years ago and 1,000 years later were the same person, she selfishly hoped that this Mo.Yi was the Mo.Yi from 1,000 years later and not 1,000 years ago. Doesn't the host have the brocade pouch given by Murong Nan? Why don't you open it and take a look? Brocade pouch? Luo Qingshun frowned and took out the brocade pouch from her pocket. She always thought that this was just a wedding gift from Murong Nan. She didn't know that there was a letter in the brocade pouch. A letter written by Mo.Yi himself, a letter to her. Qingshun, please forgive me for leaving without saying goodbye. Please forgive me for not keeping my promise. Please forgive me for my selfishness. Please forgive me for my deep love. If you have a chance to see this letter, please remember everything I did, and don't forget me. I hope that Murong will take good care of you. When I gave him this letter, I didn't think it would fall into your hands. But I still have hope in my heart, hope that you can see this letter. If you don't see it, it proves that Muron Nan is a bad guy. But he must also be a bad guy who will treat you well. If you see it, it proves that he is a good person who will treat you well. I use the secret technique of yin and yang circulation. If I succeed, I won't return to hell. Although the probability is very low, I want to try. Because I think if there is a miracle in this world, the heavens will give me a chance to love you. Mo Ye's last words. Luo Qingqin's right hand holding the letter couldn't help but tremble. Sometimes, being too eager to express one's inner thoughts would cause one to fall into a panic. System. So he is my MOE? The system spread out its non-existent hands, indicating that it was a little tired. Ha! Luo Qingqin was surprised. She looked at the clothes she was wearing, and it was her from 1,000 years in the future, not 1,000 years ago. Then, could it be that she would meet the original owner in this plane? The host won't see the host because this is a parallel universe. The host's fate in this parallel universe is to go to the border with her mother. Luo Qingqin nodded in understanding. She was clearer than anyone about the concept of parallel universes. That is to say, besides the host, everyone else is real, including Feng Ling Air. Thinking of this, her heart sank inexplicably. Chapter 23:13. Moonlight Street was still as beautiful as before. Mo had already been in this world for 7 years. She didn't know what kind of mood he had for 7 years in this world. Looking at the same blue sky, looking at her 1,000 years later. Come, take a look. The palace is electing a doctor and a doctor. In a daze, several soldiers walked past her and placed the imperial notice on the bulletin board. Luo Qingqin walked forward and looked around. Then someone beside her took down the imperial notice. She was stunned for a bit and looked over at that woman. She saw that she was wearing a plain long gown, and there was a trace of arrogance in her eyes. She was a beauty, but she wasn't a beauty that liked makeup. After she took down the imperial notice, she turned to the soldier beside her and said, I want to apply for the doctor position. You? The soldier looked over her and said, Can you really do it? It wasn't that the soldier was looking down on the woman standing beside her, but she didn't look like a doctor at all. He felt that no matter how he looked at her, she was just too weak. You'll know once you give it a try. The woman slightly nodded. Her eyes inadvertently looked at Luo Qingqin, and a trace of light flashed in her eyes. I also want to apply. Luo Qingqin looked up and said, How about you let me enter the palace with this girl? The soldier looked at Luo Qingqin and was very satisfied. He waved his hand and said, Come with me. If your medical skills aren't up to standard, you'll be beaten. Deep in the palace, it was like spring. The garden was filled with peach blossoms, creating a beautiful scene. The air was filled with the rich fragrance of peach blossoms. She closed her eyes and felt that nothing had changed. She was still the princess, and he was still the heaven's fate master that made her peach blossom wine. I'm called Misha. What's your name? The woman walking beside her suddenly spoke. Her clean eyes looked at her seriously. Luo Qingqin looked up and said, Qing, Miss, you don't look like a doctor at all. You don't look like a doctor at all. Misha chuckled. That soldier, on the other hand, did he really think that this was a beauty pageant and judge people by their appearance? She just looked a little weak. Why couldn't she become a doctor? Were doctors supposed to be tall, sturdy, and beautiful? Hearing this, Luo Qingqin smiled faintly and didn't reply. Seeing that she was not an arrogant person, Misha continued, Do you know why the palace is recruiting doctors? She was slightly stunned and frowned slightly. This was also the reason why she had some doubts along the way. The recruitment of medical officers was different from the recruitment of palace maids. It was not an election among the people. Instead, it was a method similar to the imperial examination. One could only enter the imperial court and become an official in the end. Except for the imperial physicians in the Imperial Academy of Medicine, who had a higher rank in the palace, the other medical officers and female medical attendants had a lower rank than the palace maids. However, there were many more of them than the palace maids. Therefore, this was not a pleasant task. Could there be another reason? Luo Qingqin pursed her lips and said, Someone in the palace is sick. Generally speaking, when a doctor was recruited, it meant that even the imperial physicians had no way to treat the illness. They could only place their hopes in the people. Smart. Misha snapped her fingers and said, and it's a very, very important person who is sick. The emperor. Is it? Could it be that Mou is sick? She suddenly felt an inexplicable uneasiness in her heart. Her palms unconsciously became cold. Chapter 23:14. Misha's voice wasn't loud, but it was like a basin of cold water that was splashed directly on her head, and a chill ran through her heart. She even froze in place for 2 seconds, unable to return to her senses. Hey, what are you doing? Hurry up and keep up. Seeing Luo Qingchen stop, the soldiers impatiently shouted. Misha pulled on her sleeve and said, "Don't be in a daze. This palace isn't like the outside world. You can lose your head at any time." Luo Qingchen frowned. Her body was still moving forward, but her mind was a mess. She suddenly didn't understand. Since the system said this was 1,000 years ago, then the original host should no longer exist. Mou was still that Mou, but the woman Misha said he cared about shouldn't be the original host. Shuttling back and forth between the 3 planes, even Luo Qingchen felt like her brain wasn't enough. With the increasing difficulty of the task, it was unknown what would happen next. But at least in this plane, she really wouldn't experience any more changes. She was already very tired. From 1,000 years ago to 1,000 years later to 1,000 years ago, the love and hate she experienced was not something others could understand. The soldiers brought them to the herb storage, where an old man with a white beard and a very enchanting aunt greeted them. Besides her and Misha, there were a total of 10 doctors chosen to enter the palace. They were all talented people who were recruited from all over the world. The old man looked like an imperial doctor, and the aunt should be the person in charge of the palace. Since everyone is here, I'll say the ugly words first. Aunt Qin slightly glared at them and said, "Everyone here is the one who took down the imperial list. This list isn't something you can take down just because you want to. If you can cure imperial concubine Ying's illness, you'll be promoted and become rich. You won't have to worry about food or clothing. If you can't cure her, you may not be able to leave alive." Aunt Qin said a whole paragraph, but Luo Qingchen only heard 4 words, imperial concubining. These 4 words kept echoing in her mind for almost the entire afternoon. Did he get married in this plane? Stop daydreaming. Misha frowned and looked at her seriously. This isn't a joke. There's no turning back now. No matter what, you have to pass the test first. Luo Qingchen's eyes trembled. She took a deep breath before she came back to her senses. The white-bearded old man was called Gu Jin, and he was the most famous imperial physician in the imperial hospital. Why was he so serious? His medical skills were brilliant. The questions he gave were both simple general knowledge and complex analysis of medicinal properties. It was a good thing that this wasn't too hard for Luo Qingchen. Misha was very good. Many times, before Luo Qingchen could choose the formula for the antidote, Misha had already finished writing it. In addition to the 2 of them who passed the assessment, only a young master named Su Nuo passed the assessment. At first, Luo Qingchen didn't notice Su Nuo. Only when he finished answering all the questions did she notice him. He was a young man with delicate features who looked somewhat similar to Murong in 1,000 years later. "You 3 stay here. The other 7 go to the back door to receive 10 boards each and go home." Aunt Qin yawned and said, "Imperial Physician Gu, the Emperor is really looking for a needle in a haystack. These people who took down the imperial list are like heaven and earth compared to the imperial physicians." Chapter 23:15. Aunt Qin rolled her eyes and said, "I advise you not to be so arrogant. You all think you're a divine doctor, helping the world and saving the common people. In this palace, there is no lack of people who can save the common people." It had to be said that her words were very sarcastic, but Luo Qingchen felt that it was reasonable. We know that our medical skills may not be as good as those of the imperial hospital. Luo Qingchen gently pulled on Misha's sleeve, raised her eyes, and continued. "But sensing imperial concubine Ying's illness, The imperial doctors of the imperial hospital are helpless. At least, we still have value. You're good at talking. Aunt Sheen crossed her arms and said, "Next, you three will follow Imperial Dr. Gu to the Imperial Hospital to study Imperial Concubine Ying's medical records. I wish you good luck." As soon as her voice fell, Aunt Sheen didn't forget to look at Luo Qingchun before turning to leave. The soldiers on the side asked, "Aunt, do you still need to announce the results?" "Of course," she coldly said. "Do you think that the three of them can cure Imperial Concubine Ying's illness?" "Yes, wow. They actually look down on us, Luo Qingchun made a gesture and said, "Who told me talk less?" In fact, it wasn't difficult to see that Misha was a person with a temperament. If she had to use a sentence to describe it, it would probably be, "I understand the reason, but I can't do it." In the next 2 hours, Imperial Dr. Gu gave them a copy of Imperial Concubine Ying's medical records while dictating her illness. Luo Qingchun beat around the bush and roughly knew the story of Lin Ying and the Lin family. It turned out that Lin Ying's family had already declined 8 years ago, but because of Mo Ye's help, the Lin family was able to breathe a sigh of relief on the verge of death. But that night, when Mo Ye summoned Lin Ying to the palace, Lin Ying fell ill. This illness lasted for 7 years, and she never woke up again. Now, a few days ago, the stars changed, and Lin Ying finally woke up. But after waking up, she was a fool. No one knew why Lin Ying had become like this. The entire Imperial Hospital was helpless and could only ask for help from the people with special abilities. The story was very short, but Luo Qingchun felt as if a huge stone was pressing down on her heart, making it hard for her to breathe. This disease is not easy to cure. Our Imperial Institute of Medicine has tried many methods, but none of them worked. Imperial Physician Gu's low voice slowly sounded. "If any of you can cure Imperial Concubine Ying, it will be a great merit." Su Nua roughly read through it and then said, "How much time do we have?" 3 days. Dr. Gu said, "In 3 days, each of you must come up with a treatment plan. Otherwise, I don't know if you will be able to leave this palace alive. It seems that the current emperor is a very violent person." Luo Qingchun smiled bitterly, her eyes full of helplessness. Who was Lin Ying? Why was she Mo Ye's concubine? For Luo Qingchun, this was perhaps the question she was most concerned about. That Mo Ye who kept saying that he had arranged everything for her. Why would he marry someone else? "Shut up, the emperor is not someone we can talk about." Dr. Gu angrily rebuked, a pair of round eyes angrily staring at Luo Qingchun. Su Nua, who was standing at the side, hurriedly said, "Dr. Gu, don't be angry. This is probably the first time this girl has seen such a big world. Don't take it to heart." Chapter 23:16. After Imperial Dr. Gu left, the three of them looked at each other. Misha breathed a sigh of relief and said, "This is the first time I've seen someone with more courage than me. You two really." Su Nua sighed at the side. "If I hadn't seen your medical skills with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed that you really came here to seek a bright future." It was obvious that they didn't want to live long and came here to die. These two girls each said one sentence, whether it was in front of Aunt Sheen or Imperial Dr. Gu. Why did it feel like they were tired of living? Luo Qingchun smiled awkwardly. Slip of the tongue, slip of the tongue. Although there were thousands of knots in her heart, she wasn't a person who would bring bad emotions to the people around her. There were some things in the heart, and the answer would eventually come out. Why don't we go back and study it first? Su Nua gave a suggestion. Luo Qingchun and Misha both thought it was feasible. The palace maids had already been waiting for them at the door. The place where they lived was not far from the Imperial Hospital. After Misha lit a lamp, she stood in front of the window, as if looking in a certain direction. Luo Qingchun held her chin with her left hand, and her right hand habitually tapped on the table. Only Su Nua was very serious about studying Lin Ying's condition. "What are you two doing in the palace?" Luo Qingchun and Misha called out in surprise at the same time, revealing looks of panic. It was like their thoughts had been seen through and their eyes kept sparkling. Of course, this kind of reflection, like a mirror, they naturally understood each other's state of mind. Suna narrowed her eyes and looked at them as a bystander. You wouldn't be assassins, right? Assassin your head. Luo Qingshun cleared her throat and said, I just didn't think. Me too, me too. Misha immediately closed the window and walked in their direction in 3 steps. I don't have the strength to trust a chicken, okay? How could I be an assassin? No, no, no. Su Nuo shook her head and looked at them with an expression of seeing everything. Your eyes tell me that things aren't that simple? Are you trying to get close to someone? Hiss. At the same time, they sucked in a breath of cold air. Luo Qingshun and Misha looked at each other, then immediately turned to look at Su Nuo and said, Of course not. After saying these words, Luo Qingshun knit her brows. She felt like she had revealed 300 tales here. Little did they know, Su Nuo chuckled and said, The only person who wants to get close to the palace is probably the current emperor. You shouldn't be wishful thinking. What's wrong with the current emperor? Misha was the first to answer. It doesn't matter who you are if you don't like someone. If I don't like it, I don't like it. Speaking of which, ever since the emperor ascended the throne, he has never chosen a harem. Only Lin Ying and her sister Lin Jiao live in the harem. Su Nuo raised her eyebrows and said, He is probably the most affectionate emperor I have ever seen. Is it really the most affectionate? Luo Qingshun closed her eyes and said, Then Lin Ying should be very beautiful. No, I also heard from the palace maids. Su Nuo shook her head gently and said, Concubining is a disfigured woman. Her face is full of scars, and even her original face can't be seen clearly. After Su Nuo finished this sentence, the air fell into a short silence. Seeing that no one spoke, she continued, So, I said that the current emperor is the most affectionate emperor I have ever seen. Chapter 23:17. What Luo Qingshun didn't expect was that she didn't see Lin Ying, but on the afternoon of the second day, she met her sister Lin Jiao. Actually, this wasn't a coincidence, but Misha went to find Lin Jiao. When Luo Qingshun and Su Nuo arrived, Misha was already pressed to the ground by a group of guards, the skin on her face bruised. Who was I, so was you? Lin Jiao lowered her head and looked at Misha on the ground. You actually deserve to enter the palace? Misha clenched her teeth and shouted, Shameless! It was this woman who snatched away her childhood sweetheart, senior brother Yiran. She was now the #1 disciple of Imperial Physician Gu. If I'm shameless, then what are you? Lin Jiao looked at Misha with disdain. Yiran doesn't like you. Why are you pestering him? A guy who only knew a bit of medical skills and looked pretty good, Lin Jiao, disdained him. Okay? In her eyes, her other half must be the most outstanding person in the world. For example, the current emperor. But she still didn't understand why the emperor, who had a bewitching appearance, only cared about her disfigured and foolish sister. As sisters, she and her sister were 70% similar. When Lin Ying wasn't disfigured, she was also a beauty, but her appearance was disfigured for many years. Even she almost couldn't remember what Lin Ying looked like before. But the emperor, who was above everyone, still held her in the palm of his hand. If it wasn't for you, he would like me. Misha cried and shouted at the top of her lungs. Luo Qingshun frowned. A faint light flashed in her eyes. It turned out that the direction Misha was looking at last night was the direction of the Imperial Physician Hospital. She was looking at the Yi Rand they were talking about. Although Luo Qingshun didn't completely understand the story between them, but from the point of their argument, it should be a love triangle story. Aha! Lin Jiao sneered. Without me, he still doesn't like you. Why don't you look in the mirror? With your appearance, you'll only have a chance to get Yi Ran's attention if you reincarnate. She didn't like Yi Ran, but it didn't mean that she didn't like the feeling of being pampered. Yi Ran treated her very well. The first time they met, it was almost love at first sight. Later on, he did not even return to his sect and stayed in the palace. Shut up! Misha cried loudly, attracting the attention of many onlookers. Luo Qingshun's gaze landed on Lin Jiao. She felt that Lin Jiao's appearance was indeed somewhat similar to her own. Especially those eyes. Miss Lin, how should we deal with this person? The guard standing at the side saw that more and more people were gathering around, and in order to prevent chaos, He took the lead and asked with cupped hands, "Drag her out and give her 50 beatings." She looked at Misha and said, "If she's alive, throw her out of the palace. If she's dead, throw her into a mass grave." The two bodyguards looked at each other and said in unison, "Yes." Wait a minute, wait a moment. Luo Qingxin originally planned to confront this so-called Lin Jiao by herself. But he didn't expect Su Nuo to open his mouth at the same time. Lin Jiao frowned and looked in the direction of the source of the sound. Luo Qingxin followed behind Su Nuo, frowning slightly. She narrowed her eyes and looked at Lin Jiao, who was not far away. She was wearing a pink dress, her long hair tied with a young girl's ribbon, and her face was painted with exquisite makeup. She looked energetic and didn't seem to be troubled by Lin Ying's matter at all. There were countless thoughts hidden in her eyes. Chapter 23:18. You? Ying? Lin Jiao froze for a moment before shaking her head. No, there's actually someone who looks so similar in this world. Misha turned her head slightly, not daring to look at Luo Qingxin and Su Nuo. After all, she did have a purpose for coming to the palace. Relying on the medical skills she learned from her teacher, she actually came to the palace to find her senior brother. We were ordered to treat Imperial concubine Ying's illness. Luo Qingxun looked at her slightly flustered expression and narrowed her eyes. Now that we have some progress, this miss wants to stop us. What is your intention? Hearing this, Lin Jiao slightly gritted her teeth. She looked at the person in front of her who looked 80% like her younger sister, and her heart sank. The current emperor doted on her younger sister, Lin Ying, and the entire court and harem knew this. But Lin Ying had been asleep for many years, and her appearance had been disfigured a long time ago. She couldn't even remember what she looked like. But this person looked so much like her. If the emperor saw her face, wouldn't he? Thinking of this, Lin Jiao clenched her fists and looked up. How dare you? An insignificant female doctor who hasn't been conferred the title dares to speak to me like this. Do you know who I am? It doesn't matter who you are. Luo Qingxun raised her eyebrows and smiled. The important thing is that we can cure your younger sister's illness, but you can't. Luo Qingxun thought that her fierce words would at least make Lin Jiao hesitate. After all, she was her younger sister, and she always hoped that she could get better. Little did she know that. She actually looked up and chuckled. I can't cure my younger sister's illness, but that doesn't mean you have the chance. If you have something to say, come at me. Misha was still pressed to the ground, but she didn't forget to struggle and say, it has nothing to do with them. Come at you? To be honest, I don't even want to look at you. She sneered, and her gaze fell on Luo Qingxun. She muttered in a low voice, but there are some people who absolutely can't appear in front of the emperor. Although many of the women who entered the palace these years were devastatingly beautiful, and there were even a few who looked similar to her younger sister, Lin Ying. However, the strange thing was that the current emperor had never opened his eyes to look at any of the women. He was only protecting Lin Ying, this little sister who was inferior to him in every way since they were young. In fact, she wasn't very afraid of Luo Qingxun's appearance, but with such a similar face, she would either use it for herself or completely destroy it. She hadn't made up her mind yet, so she could only lock them up first before making a decision. It was a dark, squarish room with nothing in it. Luo Qingxun and the other two didn't expect Lin Jiao to lock them up so brazenly in the harem. Firstly, she had no status. Secondly, she had no status. Just by relying on her foolish younger sister, she could obtain so much power. It seemed that the current emperor really valued Lin Ying. Sigh. Misha sighed softly a few times. She looked at them and said, it's all my fault. I dragged you down with me. Good that you know. Su Nuo leaned against the wall and looked at her. So your lover likes that tigress? I like this adjective. Luo Qingxun imitated Su Nuo's action and casually leaned against the wall. Senior brother, Misha bit her lip and said, he and I are childhood friends. I didn't know that after he saw Lin Jiao, his soul was hooked by her. Chapter 23:19. Senior isn't a scumbag. Misha still spoke up for him and pouted. He's just chasing after the person he likes. But that Lin Jiao, isn't worth it. Misha didn't know much about Lin Jiao, but she knew a little about her. Before she entered the palace, she liked many men. At that time, the Lin family hadn't declined yet. She was the type to fall in love with every man she saw. So many men were hurt by her. Miss Misha, Luo Qingshan cleared her throat and said, "Actually, I don't know much about the things between the two of you, and I shouldn't speak rashly. However, a girl should have a girl's pride. If you can't love him, then don't love him." Luo Qingshan probably knew that what she was saying now was completely easy to say, but unrequited love could never be counted as feelings. If that young man called Yi Ran never liked Misha, then why would he waste so much precious time and precious love for someone who wasn't worth it? But other than him, I haven't seen anyone more outstanding. Misha looked very upset. She chased him all the way from the sect to the palace, but she didn't even see Yi Ran's face, but she was already locked in this broken place by that hateful woman. The person you like doesn't have to be outstanding. Luo Qingshan looked at her with the tone of a young girl who was enlightened for the first time and said, "Like is like. Even if he isn't outstanding, you can like him." Agreed. Su Nuo didn't forget to express his opinion. The next second, Luo Qingshan said, "Look, Su Nuo is not bad." Don't drag me into this." Misha pulled the corner of her mouth and said, "I don't like gigolos." Su Nuo immediately changed his expression and said, "How do I look like a gigolo? You asked Qing if you look like one." Luo Qingshan glanced at Su Nuo. He really did look similar to Murong Nan, but he looked more childish than him. Cough, cough. Luo Qingshan coughed lightly and said, "Stop arguing. Let's think of a way to get out. Imperial Dr. Gu must know that the three of us are missing. Although there are few people in the harem, it doesn't mean that the palace maids are tight-lipped. Lin Jiao can't keep us here for long. She will make a decision soon." Make a decision? Make what decision? Misha was confused. She didn't understand what Luo Qingshan said. Su Nuo quickly. He touched his chin and said, "Lin Jiao's either win us over or what? Kill us. Consort STTS's lint. Teet teet, SSS consort. Teet, teet, TTS everything. Teet teet, S. TTSSD it. TT." All the coincidences had been carefully calculated and divined. But there was one thing that you didn't know. She had a system that didn't belong to any time and space system. She wants to kill us? Misha looked at Luo Qingshan in disbelief and said, "Why?" Chapter 23:20. But it's broad daylight. Misha didn't forget to use two idioms. She pursed her lips and said, "She can't kill people at will." Su Nuo gently frowned and said, "There are so few people in the harem. If she wants to get rid of us, there must be a way. But our current identity is to treat imperial concubining. If we suddenly disappear, it will definitely arouse suspicion." Pong. Before Su Nuo's voice fell, the door of the secret room was opened. A dazzling light came in. Luo Qingshan narrowed her eyes. 3 people in eunuch uniforms came in. One of them spread out the imperial edict in his hand and said, "By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees. You sinners conspired to murder imperial concubining. The evidence is conclusive. Today, you will be sent to the Supreme Court and executed tomorrow." Luo Qingshan and the other 2 were suddenly startled. Almost at the same time, they looked up at the eunuch standing in front of them. Misha's voice trembled a little as she said, "What did you say? Imperial concubining? You sinners don't pretend to be wronged. Miss Lin Jiao has already reported to the emperor. After the 3 of you treated imperial concubining, she died suddenly. It's the greatest evil that the heavens can't tolerate." The eunuch in the lead looked quite agitated as he spoke. He was like a righteous messenger, criticizing these hateful people. "We didn't even see imperial concubine Ying's face. How do we treat her? How do we kill her? You treated imperial concubine Ying, but more than a dozen palace maids and eunuchs saw it with their own eyes. I also saw it. You, how can you collude like this?" It was probably the first time Misha saw this kind of making up a story with one's eyes open scene. She couldn't recover for a long time. It seems that Miss Lin Jiao chose the latter. She didn't take us for her own use, but to get rid of us quickly. Sunua seemed very calm. Her clear eyes narrowed slightly as she sneered. How can you talk such nonsense? Killing is killing. Moreover, Imperial concubine Ing is the most important person to the Emperor. You did such a crazy thing. Burning at the stake is a light punishment for you. We're crazy, but your brains... Ha! Luo Qingshan laughed coldly and interrupted me, Shah. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. They were the ones who truly had no status and no status. Whatever Lin Jiao wanted to do, there was nothing they could do. If she was alone, it would have been easier to deal with. Now that Misha and Sun Nual were here, however, things became even more troublesome. You can be considered a smart person. The eunuch in the lead raised his eyebrows and smiled. Reincarnate well in your next life. Don't ever have this face. Luo Qingshan looked at the eunuch's smug and arrogant expression. She wanted to rush over and give him 2 slaps. But she told herself that a gentleman would not resort to violence. The next second, she curled her lips into a smile and said, I want this face. If I'm good-looking, I'll anger your master to death. Who told her to be born a few hours too early? She missed out on this face. After saying this, she snorted arrogantly and walked forward. As she walked, she didn't forget to say, Hurry up. Aren't we going to the Supreme Court? Why are you dawdling? Don't you want to go? Since she opened her mouth to speak, the surrounding air seemed abnormally quiet. The eunuchs all looked at her in disbelief. There was a feeling of being intimidated by her aura, not to mention Su Nual and Misha who were standing behind her. They were completely stunned. Chapter 23-21. It had to be said that the Supreme Court's treatment was much more spacious than Lin Jiao's small secret room. Especially the death row prison. Not only was it clean, but there was also a lot of delicious food. This is the last meal before you die. Enjoy it. A guard on duty said, Be a full ghost on the road to the underworld. Misha looked at the table full of food, blinked cautiously, and said, It can't be poisonous, right? Little did she know that the guard laughed and said, You will be burned at the stake tomorrow. If you are poisoned to death, we will all be buried with you. In their eyes, dying from poison was definitely a better death than being burned at the stake. After the guard left, Su Nual gave them a look and said softly, After eating and drinking, it's time to think about how to escape. What's your opinion? Luo Qingshan took a sip of the wine on the table. A faint li guang flashed in her eyes. In fact, she hadn't thought about it yet. If it weren't for Misha and Su Nual, she would have escaped in minutes. But because it made escaping a little tricky. I think he will come to save me. Misha put down the drumstick, looking a little depressed and expectant. After all, she was waiting for Yi Ran to come. She felt that her childhood sweetheart senior brother would definitely come to save her. Luo Qingshan knit her brows and said with a sigh, I think that he should already know about such a big matter like the Supreme Court ruling. It wasn't Luo Qingshan who rejected this man, but he hadn't appeared yet, which proved that he didn't intend to get involved. No, Misha was very determined, looking at them with determination. Yi Ran will definitely come. He won't leave me alone. Su Nual saw that she was about to cry, shook his head at Luo Qingshan, and then changed the topic. If your senior brother didn't come to save us, do you know any other big shots who can come to save us? Luo Qingshan looked at Su Nual's relaxed expression and suddenly doubted his identity. He didn't look like an ordinary person. I don't think anyone will come to save me. Luo Qingshan pursed her lips and smiled bitterly. After all, I don't know anyone here. The only one she knew was the emperor who personally issued the imperial edict. People, you have to believe in miracles. Su Nual looked at her disappointed face, smiled, and said, Maybe there is. This night, it seemed to be especially long. The 3 people who had just met for the first time had actually become the people who were about to die together. It was probably because of the bizarre fate that made them talk through the night. Misha said that she liked Yi Ran very much. When they first met, she was attracted by Yi Ran's appearance. It was love at first sight, but it was a pity that Yi Ran did not like her. But no matter how hard she tried, She thought that she was not good enough, but when Yi Ran saw Lin Jiao for the first time, it was love at first sight. She suddenly came back to her senses. It was not that she was not good, but she had never entered Yi Ran's heart. Su Nuo said he didn't have a lover, but he had a brother who took care of him. He yearned for freedom, yearned for medical skills, yearned to use his own hands to save many people, and even more people, actually from a certain point of view. Su Nuo's character was a bit paranoid. He actually liked war, but not for killing, but for saving. In his eyes, only in times of war could a person's value be reflected. In order to save people, he looked forward to casualties. Chapter 23-22. It was probably at some point later that she suddenly remembered that when she was in the Moonlight Palace, he had made her drink that cup of pear blossom wine for no reason. It was not because he was reluctant, but because he was protecting her. Wow! Misha was stunned, her hands clasped together. So handsome. But that was just a small cup of wine. If it was a slow-acting poison, drinking a small cup should not be a big deal. Indeed. Luo Qingshun nodded and chuckled. Now that I think about it, his expression at that time was really full of loopholes. If that woman had observed carefully, maybe his plan would have been exposed. Feng Ling'er probably really liked Mo Yi. Actually, I can understand. Su Nuo looked up and down at Luo Qingshun. If you really love someone, even if it is a little bit bad, you are not willing to let her bear it. I can understand now. She smiled faintly, her clear eyes twinkling slightly. She understood Mo Ye's forbearance, understood Mo Ye's broken promises, understood Mo Ye's love. But he is no longer here, right? Su Nuo narrowed his eyes and suddenly said deeply, maybe some people can only accompany you for a part of the road, but some people can accompany you for a lifetime. When Su Nuo said this, his expression was focused and serious. Luo Qingshun teased with a smile. Who is the one who will accompany you for a lifetime? Me. Su Nuo unabashedly bumped into Luo Qingshun's clear eyes. Half leaning on the wall, the corners of his mouth raised a faint smile. Wait. Misha blinked and blinked again. Are you confessing? Su Nuo heard this, shrugged his shoulders, and said with a relaxed smile, Before I die, I am just joking. He looked at Luo Qingshun again and added, Miss Qing, don't take it seriously. Whether it is serious or not, I will choose the person who will accompany me for a part of the road. Luo Qingshun nodded slightly and said seriously, It can only be him. So, the person you said would come and save you? His voice was neither soft nor heavy, but it was like a needle pricking her body. At the same time, deep in the palace, Lin Ying's corpse lay in a crystal coffin. His face was pale, and his lips were purple. There were no signs of struggle, so the one who did this could only be someone he was familiar with. Your Majesty, the imperial edict has been delivered. The eunuch at the side said, The evidence is conclusive. Miss Lin Jiao has already sent them to the Supreme Court. They will be executed tomorrow afternoon. Mo Yi replied faintly. His expression did not change, but his right hand was constantly calculating. 7 years. 7 whole years. The reincarnation of all things was a law. He had already calculated her fate. As long as his master agreed, she would be able to appear in the world 1,000 years ago. At this very moment in the world he was in, as a heaven's fate master, this was his only chance to keep her by his side. Shintu was gone. Lin Ying's death was inevitable. There should be a soul that will enter this body tomorrow. It will come from her soul 1,000 years later. In these 7 years, countless calculations were made. Again and again, he changed an irreversible fate. Every time, it was for her to arrive in this world. For example, 3 years ago, the imperial court ordered the Chun family to be annihilated. But in order to change the so-called butterfly effect, he leaked the heavens' secret, allowing them to escape. Those who were supposed to die had survived, and those who were supposed to live had died. He went against the laws of the heavens' fate in order to smoothly receive her. Chapter 23-23. Miss Lin Jiao said that those 3 people were extremely cruel and caused imperial concubine Ying to die a tragic death. the eunuch said while wiping his tears. She was the emperor's most beloved concubine. Even burning her at the stake would be too easy on those three crazy murderers. As a personal eunuch, even though he had been by Mo's side for many years, he still didn't understand his temper. He only knew that he had an empty harem and had only taken in a sleeping woman as his concubine. This woman's family was from the right faction. After he ascended the throne, they had lost all their power and gradually declined. But at this time, Mo did not hesitate to take in the sleeping Lin Ying as his concubine, and the Lin family rose up again. This included her sister Lin Jiao, who could freely enter the harem without any restrictions. Everything he had done was for the sake of tomorrow. Mo still responded faintly, his expression still very serious. He had calculated Lin Ying's return. As for how she died, or who killed her, he didn't care at all. He only cared about these 7 years of hard work, and whether or not he could see her again and pass through 1,000 years of time. The next morning, the sun was just right, and the air was filled with a hot and anxious aura. Yi Ran was wearing a gray robe as he stood behind Lin Jiao. His gaze was a bit heavy, and when he looked at Misha, he slightly frowned, but he didn't say anything. Misha looked at him as he was escorted away by the guards. She just looked at him like this, but he turned his face and held up an umbrella for Lin Jiao. All of her beautiful dreams were shattered at this moment. Luo Qingqian's group was brought to the execution ground. The sun was high in the sky. Lin Jiao was wearing a plain white robe as she stood not far away. Her eyes were red, but the corners of her mouth were slightly raised. "You murderers!" She roared and clutched her chest. Why? Why are you doing this to my little sister? She's still so young. How can you do such a heartless thing for your own selfish interests?" When the surrounding commoners heard this, they all whispered to each other as they discussed the execution at the stake. I heard that the one who died this time was the emperor's most beloved concubine. That's right. It is precisely because of this that they were sentenced to death. These 3 people really deserve to die. Who knows what's going on in the palace? Conflicts of interest, officials protecting each other. There are too many to count. Maybe he's just a scapegoat. Luo Qingqian's ears were filled with chatter. She nodded slightly, looked at the scorching sun, and frowned slightly. It seemed that he had no choice but to use his special ability. "Time's up, begin the execution." A token fell from the sky. Except for Misha, who was frantically praying to the heavens, Luo Qingqian and Su Nuo were quite calm. A few torches were thrown onto the straw at their feet, and the fire instantly spread. Luo Qingqian closed her eyes. When she was about to use the space-time freeze, a gust of cold wind blew. A young man in black clothes descended from the sky and untied the ropes binding them. Big. How dare you?" The executive officer shouted. "Someone come. Someone is trying to rob the execution ground. Someone come quickly." Due to inertia, the moment the ropes in their hands broke, the 3 of them simultaneously fell towards the bottom of the platform. Luo Qingqian was about to fall sideways and stand firm when Su Nuo pulled her wrist. With a few qinggong, she steadily brought her to the ground. As for Misha, Chapter 23-24. In the blink of an eye, the black-clothed man wrapped his arms around Misha's waist and hugged her. Some people can fall in love at first sight, while others can fall in love at first sight. Most women yearn for a hero, and Su Yan's appearance at the moment of life and death made him a hero in Misha's heart. "What are you waiting for? Catch them," Lin Jiao roared. "If they resist, execute them on the spot." She seemed a little anxious. This matter can't be blown out of proportion. She must kill them as soon as possible. "With just you." The black-clothed man's cold eyes narrowed, protecting Misha behind him. His deep eyes were filled with cold light as he looked at her. "You think you are worthy to kill this king?" In the chaos, Luo Qingqian took advantage of the fire to take out the Phoenix dance sword from her storage space. Dressed in white, her eyes were cold. The surrounding people were evacuated. In addition to the guards at the execution ground, there were also the palace's imperial guards and the Lin family's guards. About 40 to 50 people, Luo Qingqian's group only had 4 people. Among them, There was Misha, who didn't know martial arts, and Su Nua, who didn't know martial arts. They were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. You? Where did you get that sword? Su Nua looked at Luo Qingshun, who was ready for battle, his eyes flashing with doubt. In fact, in that moment, he had an inexplicable panic. The urge to protect her spread from the bottom of his heart, as if they had met before, or perhaps they would meet in the future. I picked it up. Luo Qingshun's eyebrows moved slightly. Now is not the time to talk about this. Do you know martial arts? No. Su Nua shook his head honestly. But I will shout for everyone. Luo Qingshun rolled her eyes in annoyance. She doesn't want people who are lying on the ground shouting 666. Okay? Hey, this big brother. How many people can you fight? In the next second, she looked at the black-clothed man standing next to her and said, How about one person take care of half? 3 seconds later, he sneered. You protect them. I will take care of the rest. Ong, Luo Qingshun suddenly shouted, and with a small movement skill, she immediately rushed into the crowd with the Phoenix Dance sword in her hand. The moment she landed, she didn't forget to say, I prefer to fight head-on. I will leave the matter of protecting people to you. Kill her for me. Don't leave anyone alive. Lin Jiao's eyes, her blood-red eyes, filled with killing intent. Come. Under the scorching sun in the sky, the Phoenix Dance sword swayed with the wind. Every time she swung her sword, it was as if a faint golden color had been drawn across the sky. Although it didn't draw blood, there were still small cuts on the skin. At this moment, the air was filled with a faint smell of blood. 40 to 50 people swarmed her, but they couldn't even touch the corner of her clothes, let alone hurt her. The people standing on the second floor of the tea house and Su Nua's group, not far away, all looked at her with a stunned look. Before this, no one would have thought that this seemingly weak woman's body actually contained such a huge power. When the people around her all fell to the ground, she saw Lin Jiao's pale face, and Yi Ran, who unconsciously took a step back. Yi Ran's action made her suddenly feel that maybe he didn't love Lin Jiao that much. He still loved her the most, because when she was in danger, he didn't stand in front of Lin Jiao like a man, but still stood behind her and even took a step back. Chapter 23-25. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. No one would have thought that Luo Qingshun would say this so directly. A criminal who was going to be burned at the stake actually dared to say the emperor's name. This kind of action was truly inconceivable. You, don't mess around. Lin Jiao's voice was trembling. When the ice-cold Phoenix Dance sword was placed on her neck, she felt death approaching. The person in front of her looked 80% similar to her sister, but at the same time, they didn't look that similar. Especially those eyes, which were as indifferent as dust, but contained absolute killing intent. She didn't seem to fear anyone, as if she, Lin Jiao, was no different from Zhang San or Li Si in front of her. As long as she was unhappy, she would raise her sword and it would die here. I don't know if I'll mess around, but Luo Qingshun narrowed her eyes and smiled. I have a bad temper and get angry easily. Once I get angry, I might lose my mind. Once I lose my mind. She gently moved the Phoenix Dance sword in her hand and continued. The sword doesn't have eyes. I'm warning you. You've already harmed Imperial concubine Ying. If you harm me again, the Emperor won't let you go. Her voice trembled even more. The Phoenix Dance sword had not actually moved, but her neck had already been slashed with many bloody scars. I'm already a person who's going to be executed. Do you think I'll still be afraid? Luo Qingshun shrugged. Her lips were still smiling, but it was a cold smile. It made people feel an inexplicable chill just by looking at her. Lin Jiao swallowed her saliva, her face extremely ugly. She wanted to calm herself down, but her body was honestly trembling. On the way, she kept telling herself, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Even if the woman in front of her looked very similar to Lin Ying, she wasn't Lin Ying. After so many years, there were many women who looked similar to Lin Ying in the palace. But the emperor had never looked at her, which was enough to prove the position of her disfigured sister in the emperor's heart. Now, her sister had died a tragic death. As the emperor who had always protected her, he definitely wouldn't let Lin Ying's murderer go. Then, he would definitely protect her. After all, she was Lin Ying's only sister in this world. As she thought of this, she didn't seem to be that afraid anymore. Even her footsteps quickened. She only wanted to see Mo Yi as soon as possible so that she could ask him for help and complain to him. Su Nuo and Su Yin, as well as Misha, followed behind Luo Qingxun. Misha's gaze fell on Su Yin the moment she was rescued. Although it couldn't be said to be love at first sight, he looked at her with an admiring attitude. After all, on this day, she had completely changed her concept of love. That little Misha who only liked senior brother Yi Ran seemed to have completely died the moment she was burned at the stake. Not far away was the Hall of Supreme Harmony. As they walked in from a main entrance of the palace, they were surrounded by guards with swords and sabers drawn. Luo Qingxun was not afraid. Her expression was carefree all the way until they stood at the entrance of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. A group of imperial guards came up and surrounded them with swords and sabers. "Quick, quick, inform His Majesty." Lin Jiao looked a little agitated as she stared at the leader of the imperial guards with her eyes wide open. Chapter 23-26. Thick dark clouds instantly covered the entire sky, covering the original light layer by layer. Cold winds blew everywhere, and everything in the surroundings appeared foggy. Standing behind him, Su Yin saw that the situation was a bit strange. After walking to Luo Qingxun's side, he looked at the imperial guard and said, "Su country's prince, Su Yin, requests an audience with the Mo dynasty's emperor." Luo Qingxun stared blankly, her gaze falling on Su Yin. He was actually a neighboring country's prince. Then, Su Nuo cleared his throat and said, "Brother, low-key, low-key." Su Nuo clearly thought that he had concealed his identity very well. After all, ever since he came to the Mo dynasty, no one knew his identity. However, it was precisely because he was a neighboring country's prince that he didn't fear some burning at the stake, because he knew that his brother would definitely come to save him. You said you're Su dynasty's prince?" The imperial guard leader wrinkled his brows, clearly not believing his words. Although the man in front of him had an imposing appearance and extraordinary temperament, how could a Su dynasty's prince suddenly appear in the imperial palace? "I don't need to say much to you whether I am or not. I want to see your emperor." Su Yin was concise and comprehensive, not giving any superfluous explanation, getting straight to the point. 3 seconds later, the imperial guard leader faintly nodded his head and said, "Please wait a moment." Standing to the side, Misha looked at him with some surprise, then looked at Su Nuo and asked, "The brothers around are Su dynasty's princes, then you..." She rolled her eyes and continued, "Is he a follower or a doctor?" Hearing this, Luo Qingxun stared blankly for a moment. Su Yin standing beside her also stared blankly. It had to be said that Misha was really too naive. To have a Su dynasty supreme prince go to a foreign country to save someone, then this person's position in the Su dynasty must be very good. In any case, it was impossible for him to be an attendant or a doctor. If Luo Qingxun didn't guess incorrectly, Su Nuo's identity should be more honorable than this prince called Su Yin. Coupled with the fact that both of them were surnamed Su, it was even more certain that Su Nuo should be a member of the royal family. "He's our crown prince." Su Yin frowned and put on the expression of an elder brother. He clearly knows that he carries a heavy responsibility, yet he actually left the Su dynasty without saying a word and even fell into such a dangerous situation. While what? Misha almost screamed out loud. She took a deep breath and looked at Su Nuo. You're the crown prince of the Su dynasty? What, don't you?" Su Nuo sighed and said, "If it weren't for imperial father and imperial brother urging me to ascend the throne, I wouldn't have run out. The important matters of the country and the decision of the royal family are the blessing of the people. Why are you running away?" Su Yin's tone was full of reproach. While speaking, he did not forget to look at Misha a few times. His tone softened. "I don't want to be the emperor." "Shut up," Su Yin rebuked furiously. A proud genius of the heavens actually spoke such disgraceful words. If you let imperial father know, Brother. He let out a heavy sigh and seriously looked at him. I think you're more suited to be the emperor than me. I'm such a sloppy person. I'm suited to be a little prince. You know me the best since I was young, so don't force me. Chapter 23-27. Brother. Cough. Seeing that Su Nuo still wanted to speak, Luo Qingshun hurriedly interrupted him. She tugged at the corner of her mouth and said with a smile, "That isn't our current situation not suitable to talk about this topic?" After all, the three of them had just escaped from the execution ground. Although she never thought that she would die, this was the first time she saw Mo Yi in this plane. In fact, she was very nervous. It was a kind of nervousness that made her scalp tingle. The dark clouds pressed down bit by bit, making people feel inexplicably oppressed if they looked at it for too long. This place was indeed a bit strange. Could it be that something happened to Mo Yi? Thinking of this, her eyebrows unconsciously wrinkled slightly. This place was really too strange, and Su Yin gently raised his right hand and stopped Misha, who was about to step forward. His gaze was deep as he looked at the entrance of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. His thin lips softly said, "I've long heard that the Mo Kingdom's emperor is good at communicating with spirits, especially regarding the matters of the two realms of yin and yang." "You're right." Lin Jiao, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly raised her eyes and laughed. "Our Mo Kingdom's emperor is different from you ordinary people. If you provoke the heavenly might, even 10 Su Chaos would not be enough to accompany you to the grave." Although Lin Jiao's words sounded very arrogant, it made Su Yan's brows wrinkle tighter. This Mo Yi, since ascending the throne, had a perverse character. He neither sent troops to fight nor made friends with the neighboring countries. Some small border countries thought that he was weak and wanted to ferociously go out to sea to enter the palace. What they didn't expect was that they would always die on the way to the Moonshine City before they could reach it. How they die? How did they die? Why did they die? Whether he killed them for money or not, no one knew. Once or twice, this kind of thing might be a coincidence anyway, but this kind of thing happened frequently, which always made people hesitate. Mo Yi had become a mysterious figure among the many neighboring princes. His style of doing things was ruthless and vicious. No matter what, he left no room for retreat. In fact, although Lin Jiao's words were arrogant, they were not wrong. "Then let's see if he chooses to kill you, or kill my face." She narrowed her eyes, which carried a coldness that could freeze people. A few seconds later, the door of the Hall of Supreme Harmony was opened. An imposing young man wearing a dragon robe slowly walked out from inside. There was a faint liguang in his deep, ink-like eyes. From the beginning to the end, his gaze was fixed on Luo Qingshun without the slightest shift. Your Majesty, please save Jiao Jiao." The moment she saw Mo Yi, Lin Jiao's tears fell like pearls from a broken necklace. Her eyes were red, and her voice was full of grievance. Mo Yi's expression was very indifferent. He picked up the eunuch's white umbrella and walked in the direction of Luo Qingshun. With every step she took, she could see his face more clearly. 7 years. He had waited for 7 whole years. He had used up all the time and methods he could think of. He had traveled through 2 space-times and froze 1,000 years ago. Luo Qingshun looked at him like this. Her nose turned sour and tears began to fall. Mo Yi frowned slightly and quickened his pace. Finally, when he was about to leave and approach Luo Qingshun, Su Nuo, who was originally standing behind Luo Qingshun, suddenly came out and stood firmly in front of her. Mo Yi's eyes were indifferent, and his whole body exuded a chill. He looked at him and said, "Get out of the way." Lin Jiao, who was standing on the side, was particularly excited. This was the most perfect scene in her dream. Chapter 23-28. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. She cried out in alarm as tears fell once more. Choking with sobs, she said, "Don't come over. It's dangerous. If there's anything, come at me." Su Nuo could see the killing intent in his eyes, so he directly said, "The Mo Kingdom is so big, they wouldn't make things difficult for a girl, right?" His eyes trembled, and his voice was so cold that it didn't have a trace of warmth. He growled, "Get out of the way." He didn't know what went wrong, but he didn't know why she didn't return to the body he prepared beforehand. Instead, she reappeared in her appearance 1,000 years later. He didn't understand, but at this moment, he didn't want to understand. Hiss! The surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air. In this world, the people who could speak to Mo Yi like this were already all dead. After all, this emperor wasn't some benevolent emperor. His methods were more ruthless than any of the previous emperors of the Mo kingdom. I Su Nua. Luo Qingxun pulled him back with her left hand, while her right hand still held the phoenix dance sword to Lin Jiao's neck. She took a deep breath and continued. Your Majesty, I'm here to reverse the verdict. Your imperial concubining wasn't killed by us. I hope that your Majesty will investigate. Her tone carried a faint arrogance and awkwardness. Perhaps she still didn't understand why Mo Yi would treat Linning so well just because she looked like her. He was such an outstanding man. So how could he, because of a body, your Majesty, don't worry about me. Lin Jiao's voice still rang in his ears as she cried. This kind of deranged person, she... Hiss. Mo Yi's actions stunned everyone in the surroundings. Lin Jiao's painful cries spread out. Her arm fell to the ground with a thump, and blood instantly gushed out. Mo Yi directly grabbed her hand and used her phoenix dance sword to personally cut off Lin Jiao's arm. In fact, even Luo Qingxun didn't expect this action. Luo Qingxun was stunned for a moment. She wanted to say something, but her words were stuck in her throat. In the next second, Mo Yi pulled her arm without hesitation and pulled her into his embrace. She was stunned for a moment as she heard his deep voice and countless questions. When are you coming back? Why did he come back? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come to me? Why did you make me wait? He used almost all of his strength to hug her. His arms tightened and his body trembled. I also wanted to come and find you, but they all said that you were pampered and doted on. The other girl, she looked away with some grievance, and a faint mist flickered in her eyes. That's all because I was waiting for you. Mo Yi almost roared, then immediately calmed down and said, It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. As long as you're back, I'll do anything. The thick, dark clouds in the sky gradually dispersed. No one could understand their conversation except for themselves. Lin Jiao's despairing voice rang in his ears. Your Majesty, that person isn't Ying. She's here to confuse your Majesty. Mo Yi impatiently knit his brows. He took the phoenix dance sword from her hand and slit her throat without another word. At the same time, he didn't forget to use his other hand to cover her eyes and say, Our family's girl isn't suited to see such a bloody scene. She didn't know why this scene suddenly made her want to cry. They had put in so much effort for each other and passed through 2 spaces to get to where they were today. How hard? How hard was it? At least in this life, we won't separate, all right? She closed her eyes, and sparkling tears quietly flowed down her cheeks. In the next second, he turned around and kissed her tears as he said, Not just in this life, I want to be together in the next life. For generations to come, the love between the two of them was already destined, wasn't it? Chapter 23-29. In the 7th year of the Night Dynasty, Mo Yi had finally appointed an empress who belonged exclusively to him. She wore a phoenix coronet and a red wedding dress. Her long ribbon fell behind her, giving her a playful aura. Everyone was celebrating, except for Su Nua, who was drinking alone. She glanced in Su Nua's direction, and a faint trace of Li Guang flashed through her eyes. She felt that she could see a familiar shadow on him, half sunny, half gloomy. It seems that this brat has been plotting against you since 1,000 years ago. Mo Yi calmly glanced in Su Nua's direction, and his deep eyes flickered with a faint light. Luo Qingxun was stunned. She glanced at his handsome face and asked, What do you mean? Do you know Su Nua? If the astrolabe's calculations are correct, Mo Yi's right hand gently wrapped around her waist, pulling her into his embrace. He looked up with an expression of absolute sovereignty and said, 1,000 years from now, his name will be Murongnan. What? Luo Qingxun's eyes trembled in shock. Just as she was about to look in Su Nua's direction, Mo Yi cupped her face. She looked away in embarrassment, and a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. Mo Yi kissed her gently, bringing with him a cold breath and endless emotions. Even now, she was standing firmly by his side as his empress, but he was still afraid. He was afraid of losing her, afraid that fate would suddenly change. After all, they did not come from this world. After all, they had both experienced death. As a divinator, he knew all too well what the consequences of going against the heavens and changing fate were. He could pay for all of his suffering in his next life. In this life, please forgive him, please let him go. After the coronation ceremony ended, Mo Yi began to organize the transcendental family. The one who had once been known as the most powerful relative had fallen into a bottomless abyss overnight. Some people said that it was because concubine Ying's death had caused the Lin clan to decline. Others said the emperor had a new lover, so it was normal for his old lover to fall. Luo Qingshan didn't care much about these rumors, but Mo Yi was quite concerned. Not only did he punish all those who liked to spread rumors, he also strictly forbade anyone to speak ill of the empress. Some people said, she's just a new lover. When a prettier and younger woman appears, she'll be abandoned like consorting. However, no one knew that his so-called exclusive favor for imperial concubine Ying was just waiting for her to come. How difficult was it to cross 1,000 years and hope for a person to come? No one could understand the hardships he had gone through. Only he knew. However, Mo Yi didn't need anyone to understand him. In the 8th year of the Night Dynasty, Yi Ran was sentenced to death for selling marijuana. In the end, Misha pleaded on his behalf and saved his life. Luo Qingshan could still remember that snowy day. Yi Ran was kneeling on the ground, begging for Misha's forgiveness. He didn't know if it was out of gratitude, or because he no longer had anyone to rely on, or because of love. As an outsider, she couldn't see it clearly. She only knew that on that snowy day, Misha was only wearing a thin gauze dress. However, Yi Ran refused to let her go. At that moment, Su Yin took a jacket and held up an umbrella as he slowly walked towards Misha. She turned her head and looked into Su Yin's eyes. Her eyes instantly turned red, and she threw herself into his embrace. So the love she pursued was so sad, and the feeling of being loved was so good. Chapter 23:30. As for the Su country's Emperor Su, he had a harem of 3,000 beauties. He never favored a single person, but he would always sleep with someone on the 7th day of the 8th month. That was the day he met someone he couldn't obtain. Ever since that time, Su Nua had never returned to the Mo kingdom. It wasn't until the 15th year of the Night Dynasty that he met them when he visited a small city in the Su country, Shallow Dream City. A woman in a pink and white dress was holding onto a handsome man beside her. Although the man was dressed casually, it couldn't hide the aura he exuded. The woman seemed to have taken a fancy to some hair accessories. The man gently pulled her hair up and skillfully tied it into a beautiful bow. She smiled lightly, as if she didn't like it, but she didn't untie it. Fine snowflakes slowly fell from her eyes, captivating his eyes and captivating his heart. In reality, he never thought that he would meet someone so unforgettable in his trip to the Mo kingdom. He didn't think that he liked her that much. He could also find pleasure with other women, and he could share his body with many others. But every time it was late at night, he would always think of that day. She was dressed in white and wielded a long sword as she charged into the crowd. She didn't seem to be afraid of anything. Her clear eyes contained a faint trace of Liguang. She raised her hand and slashed down. Although she wasn't fatal, she didn't give her enemies any chance to breathe either. Perhaps it was that moment that changed him from someone who didn't want to take over the throne to someone who couldn't wait to have imperial power. But he didn't think that she would be like Misha, entering the palace for one person. Misha was doing it for Yi Ran, while she was doing it for Mo Yi. It was as if they had known each other for a long time. When they looked at each other, everyone around them paled in comparison. At that moment, he knew that he would never be able to have that sword-wielding woman. In the 17th year of the Night Dynasty, they traveled the world and returned to the palace. A few days ago, They heard that a woman had disappeared from one of the cold palaces. That was a cold palace that no one cared about. Often, mournful singing could be heard, and those who passed by would feel their hair stand on end. No one knew who that person was or why she was locked inside. They only knew that someone brought her a bowl of rice and a pot of wine every day. When Luo Qingshan found out about this, she went to the cold palace alone. The courtyard was overrun with spider vines, and there was a foul stench. Even though the sun was high up in the sky, it still made people feel gloomy. She frowned and was about to push the door open when Mo Yi stopped her. Our little empress is not suitable to go to such a place. His voice was very soft, as gentle as ever. Luo Qingshan felt her heart tremble, and she slightly knit her brows as she looked at him. Are you? Why? Why did she have an indescribable feeling in her heart? Scenes of the past flashed before his eyes, from the first time they met to the time and space that spanned 1,000 years. So promise me. He walked forward and pulled her into his embrace. You can eat whatever you like. I'll accompany you wherever you want to go. You don't have to worry about people bullying you, and you don't have to worry about power. Mo Yi, you know everything, right? She bit her lip and said in a trembling voice, What happened here? I don't know. Mo Yi gently smiled. His eyes were filled with gentleness as he said, It's just that our little empress looks especially good in empress clothes. Mo Yi, let's go back. It's time for dinner. Okay, the night wind blew. He took her hand and walked step by step into the palace filled with peach blossoms. Chapter 23:31. I am willing to become a misty rain in the human world and accompany you. I want to see you live a peaceful life and not have to worry about the rest of my life. Mo Yi, am a heaven's fate master. I can see the past and predict the future. No matter what happens to a heaven's fate master, we cannot go against the heavens and change our fate. To put it simply, there are some things that can be said and some things that can't be said. And I belong to the kind of people that can't be said or not. I won't say it. In my opinion, everyone has their own fate. Since it is fate, it is engraved on the astrolabe and cannot be easily changed. If I change it, even if I am fine in this life, I will pay a painful price in my next life. Not worth it. Not worth it. I thought that no matter who appeared, it would not change my mind. But later, I found out what is called laughable. Yuren's tragic death made me decide to seek justice for him. However, if one wanted to kill someone, it would change one's fate. The best way to do so was to make sure that the person wouldn't know who killed her until the day she died. I used the condition of calculating when Princess Luo Chao would wake up in exchange for the chance to stay in the palace and become a winemaker. But life is unpredictable. Even as a heaven's fate master, there are many things that I cannot calculate. For example, I never believed in love before, but later I believed in it and risked my life to protect it. I never thought that I would have any relationship with Princess Luo Chao. I thought that after Feng Ling Heir died, I could leave the palace and return to my sect. After all, Master Abyss was very sad about Senior Brother's death. But I found that I could not walk anymore. It was not love at first sight, nor was it deep love. She was like a ray of sunlight, so dazzling that she broke into my world. Even if I was a little cold, I could not extinguish her passion. Later, when I went to the Moon Palace, I was always thinking about her. I was afraid that she would misunderstand, but I had to let her misunderstand. Her body was not very good at first. After all, she had slept for 16 years before waking up. She must be very weak. But for some reason, she liked to run around in the snow and liked to drink. If I had to say that I liked her, it would probably be her asking me directly, Do you like Feng Ling Heir? Actually, I wanted to tell her right away, I don't like it. How could I possibly like Feng Ling Heir? I couldn't wait to kill her. I wanted her to die in incomparable pain to avenge my senior. But she doesn't know, and I can't tell her. She fainted twice, and I carried her back. I really liked the feeling of her peacefully leaning on my body. I always felt that the faint fragrance coming from her could eliminate the hostility in my body. However, I didn't expect that she would actually personally go to the Moonlight Palace. Feng Ling Heir was her concubine mother, but I always felt that she didn't look at her with respect. Instead, it was full of hostility. She didn't like Feng Ling Heir. I could tell from her eyes. I don't know why, but after knowing this, I felt an indescribable peace of mind. The guilt she felt for killing her family had lessened a lot. But that last was so worrisome. She stubbornly wanted to drink the poisonous wine I made for Feng Ling Air. How could I let her drink the poisonous wine? Even if the poison was very mild, drinking it once or twice wouldn't be a problem. But no matter how mild it was still poison. I didn't want her to drink it, not even a sip. At that moment, I snatched her wine cup. I looked at her aggrieved face and felt suffocated.